Welcome back. I'm Chris McLeod with Edmonton Global. We're here at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention, and we're sitting inside the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub booth. We've got a whole bunch of kids that are just finishing checking out our exhibit. We had probably 30 or 40 kids that just came through with their school, and I really wish that's something I'd gotten a chance to do when I was. Looks like they're probably in junior high or maybe grade 10. Yeah, it's just really cool that there's these kinds of field trips checking out the future energy systems. And speaking of future energy systems, our next segment here is with Dr. Amit Kumar, who is the Deputy Director of Future Energy Systems at the University of Alberta. Amit, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, there is so much happening at the University of Alberta. An unbelievable amount actually happening there. Can you talk, maybe before we get into hydrogen, can you just give me a little bit of a sense of the U of A?
So if you think about U of A is one of the top energy research institute in the world. We have 41,000 students that we train. We have 500 different graduate programs, 200 different undergraduate programs. And there has been a lot of focus on energy research and clean energy research. And, we have been working on all the different types of energy that you can think about. So renewable energy starting from solar, wind, geothermal, biomass energy systems. We look at conventional, the whole oil sands industry that you see here was built because of the research from University of Alberta.
Yeah.
And the University of Alberta has contributed significantly over the decades in building that large industry today.
It's you just mentioned that U of A is one of the top research institutions in the world. And actually, I think only 2 or 3 days ago, the new rankings came out, and they're in the top, I think 77 roughly is where they are. But that's, overall. When you look at things like artificial intelligence, they're number 2 in the world. I think nursing, they're number 1. Pharmaceuticals are in the top 25 or so. You go on and on and on, and there are areas that this province and the University of Alberta, which is located here, right in the heart of Edmonton, there's just so many fields that we're in the top of the world. And so in the area that you're in, how does your research and things kind of, I know you're doing some amazing things. Can you give us a sense of kind of where that's at?
My research area is predominantly working on clean energy and energy systems assessment.
Yeah.
When I joined way back in 2005, at that time, energy systems as a concept was still pretty nascent. It was not mature. People were not talking a lot about energy systems. It was mostly energy that we use.
Yeah. Well, I know what energy is. I'm not so sure I know what an energy system is.
Exactly. And so then the slowly concept, when we started doing this, we looked at the whole energy pathways as a system in terms of all the way from production, extraction, production, conversion, transportation, and utilization of energy. And that's what we bring in. We look at different pathways of producing clean energy, renewable energy, and we try to assess the environmental and the economic impact of these different pathways. And this helps, the type of information that we develop helps the government in developing policies and investment decisions. And that's what we have been doing now over decades.
Wow.
And that kind of concept now, it is a pleasure to see now that there is a lot of interest in this area and a lot of work in this area and realizing the importance of this area.
Yeah. And this whole show that we're here with is really about, connecting the research with innovation and now moving into, the real world application. Can you give some examples of, either projects you've worked on or collaborations that just help make that last answer? Like, can you connect it to, here's an example?
And the most recent example, I would give, for example, the hydrogen roadmap that the Alberta government developed. We have been working on hydrogen for over a decade, and it was predominantly focused on how do we reduce the carbon intensity of hydrogen that we produce. A decade ago, we looked at underground coal gasification and unminable coal. How do you take that out, produce hydrogen from the syngas, and then capture carbon out of that? And that has translated into a lot of work in looking at different types of production systems, assessing their environmental footprint. What we bring in is a lot of work that we do is in terms of developing fundamental engineering science-based model. And these models are pretty complex models. We talked about hydrogen production, but it doesn't stop there. if you have to look at the overall impact of hydrogen production, so conversion process is in middle of the chain. You start all the way from extraction.
Yeah.
And the moment you start producing more hydrogen, you need more resources. More resources, that means more input energy which is required. So it's a pretty complex system. And so we have been working in that domain. And that led to a lot of information Alberta specific information that we have developed. And then we did a lot of modeling under the Alberta Hydrogen Roadmap. And for Alberta Hydrogen Roadmap, we ran more than 300 different scenarios to understand what is the impact of implementing a particular source of producing hydrogen all the way from producing, transporting, conversion, and then taking it to the demand sector where you utilize it in the different sectors. So we looked at detailed residential, commercial sector, oil sands sector, industrial sector, and transportation sector. So the Alberta Hydrogen Roadmap was a kind of, I would say, how you utilize the knowledge that we created over a decade and for policy formulation. And that's a key example. There are other examples where we have been developing, and the researchers at the university are developing technologies for producing hydrogen through solar splitting, pyrolysis of natural gas. And you see that those technologies are still at nascent stage, but those once become commercial and move up the scale will have a big contribution for Alberta.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. The hydrogen roadmap is fairly new. It hasn't been around all that long, but just having a really clear federal program of what's going to happen, having a really clear provincial, roadmap for what's going to happen. Even within the hydrogen hub, we've got a base case that we're now expanding out. It really helps. I think at least it really helps industry know that there's predictability, there's transparency, and that there's a commitment from all the levels of government to actually drive this major change and transition from other fuels of sources of energy into hydrogen and many others that are more clean and renewable.
Yes, and I think for Alberta, I mean, if you think about the advantage from my perspective, if you are trying to produce energy and a renewable source, a new energy source, let's say, you need the resources to produce it. You need the expertise to produce it. You need the workforce and the infrastructure to produce it. We have been producing hydrogen for decades for our oil and gas industry. Large amount of hydrogen and at a scale. And what we are now, we have the capability in terms of producing large scale hydrogen. If you look at low carbon intensity hydrogen, we are one of the, I would say, leading jurisdiction in carbon capture and storage. Mm-hmm. And if you marry those two, you will see that we produce low carbon intensity hydrogen. And we have a trained workforce and large resources. Infrastructure in terms of capturing carbon, transporting carbon, we have those pipelines laid already. So if you think about the different ingredients to make a jurisdiction kind of, I would call it a superpower in hydrogen, that is already there. And Alberta has the opportunity to do that.
Well, we've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of days. Just spoke with Air Products. We've had conversations with David Lizelle with the Transition Accelerator, Mark Plamondon with Alberta's Industrial Heartland. And I think you're right. It's this mix of huge stores of things like natural gas. I think we have the world's third largest reserve, mixed with this carbon sequestration ability that is probably in the top 2 in the world. Those two together is a big part of that secret sauce, but it's the people, it's the infrastructure, it's what we've kind of done with it. And it's not that we're starting from scratch. We've been doing this work, as you said, for decades, probably at least 40 years. Yeah. So if there's a company, and again, we have a number of people watching from around the world, if there's a company who's interested in getting involved, are you actually doing work right with industry, or is it more of the roadmaps and kind of government work?
We do a lot of work with the industry. In fact, some of the work that I started in the hydrogen was through support from industry. Oh, wow. I mean, I lead a chair program, Energy and Environmental Systems Engineering, and this is funded by the federal government, but it's a consortium of different stakeholders. So you have federal government part of it, large industry part of it, Cenovus and Suncor. We have Environment Canada, Natural Resources Canada part of it. So it's a whole consortium of different stakeholders who are part of it. And the type of questions that we ask is, again, these transformative questions is, what kind of energy pathways are more economically viable, environmentally friendly, socially acceptable? The bigger question that we try to answer. So and in fact, at the researchers at University of Alberta, a lot of these programs are industry-funded programs. University of Alberta is one of the universities where we have the largest number of NSERC industrial research chair in the country, and which are predominantly driven by support from the industry. Mm-hmm. So a lot of work based on industry.
Oh, that sounds great. And it's good to know then. One of the things we've been talking about, with the work through Edmonton Global, is we really want to build this into a global epicenter for the hydrogen economy here within the Edmonton region. And it's then about production, which again we've got in spades, demand, which you're working on, many others are working on, and I really like that you're also talking about the innovation play, because there's so much potential here in that innovation space. So I just wonder, can you talk about maybe what's coming next in terms of research or application, or the ability for companies to come in and do R&D work in this space?
And so a lot of work that currently you see in a lot of new technologies which people are working on, one of the challenges that you see even for now for natural gas, so SMR is commercial, but you can capture 52%, you can go all the way to 85% carbon, but then what is next? If you look at newer technologies which are coming in autothermal reforming, where you can go up to 90%, 95% carbon capture. And then you have technologies like natural gas pyrolysis. So we have people who are working in these forefront, where you try to capture maximum amount of carbon. We have folks who are working on renewable-based hydrogen. So a lot of, the transition, the energy transition will happen from renewable low carbon hydrogen to renewable hydrogen, and that will happen with bringing the cost down for the renewable or green hydrogen, we say. So there is a lot of work in terms of trying to look at different types of hydrogen production from renewable sources. I personally work a lot on the biomass based hydrogen system, where we try to look at using these wood residues, or we look at agricultural residues, try to produce hydrogen through thermochemical reforming technologies. So a lot of technologies are being developed which are focused on transitioning these fossil-based industry to the renewable-based industry. And I think the key for renewable hydrogen today is high cost. So one of the challenges is to bring that down. And there is a lot of focus in moving the technology from the lab to the demonstration and commercial scale. So the researchers are working at different points in this innovation space.
Fantastic. I heard on the local news today, one of the researchers at the U of A has a new process that at the end of basically of fracking methane, that black carbon is created, which is a pretty highly valuable piece. Are you connected at all with the research happening there?
Yeah, so in fact, when we looked at the different technologies, so if you think about natural gas even, you can take natural gas to hydrogen through different pathways. The most commercial one that we use, the most mature one, steam methane reforming.
Right.
The newer one, which is closer to commercialization, we think autothermal reforming. But you have natural gas pyrolysis or depolymerization that we talk about, where you produce solid carbon. That solid carbon has value. So you're not producing gas. That solid carbon could be used for example, batteries. In the batteries, it could be used for remediation. So a lot of different use for solid carbon. And so there are, we put a lot of effort in assessing these technologies, developing the fundamental engineering-based models to assess these technologies, understand the environmental footprint, economic footprint, and that's where we are contributing to these.
Fascinating. And again, just stellar work from you and all of your colleagues. It really is world-leading research. I want to shift gears a little bit. So you've been part of the technical delegation and technical conference that's happening here. And, pretty much everything here is sold out. So the strategic conference sold out. The technical conference, it's pretty small. We only have 250 tickets to it. Next year we're going to have way more, because there's people lined up out the door to try to get in. Can you give us a sense of what's happening in those conferences and kind of what your experience so far on that technical stream has been?
Yeah, and I think these technical sessions have been very engaging. I was chairing one of the sessions yesterday on production side, and there were speakers who were talking about producing hydrogen from different sources. But the audience was very engaging. It's as if like you're having a discussion back and forth. There is a lot of presentations which are on different aspects of hydrogen production, transportation, utilization, carbon capture and storage. And my sense is the way we are going and as Alberta further works more towards developing a large scale hydrogen economy, you will see there is more and more people coming next year and the following year with a lot of interest in the way we are approaching hydrogen and working towards becoming a leader. The recent announcement, Center of Excellence on Hydrogen, another key piece. I think that this is a kind of an umbrella under which the different stakeholders could come in. You can private industry, government, academia, public, and then help in developing this economy further.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thanks so much. And your comment about it's only going to get bigger. Our goal is to build this into the world's largest hydrogen conference. It's already the largest in North America, and we've got at least a 10-year runway. And today we've got around 3,000 to 4,000 people here. We're hoping within 5 years we've got 40 to 50,000 people attending, and that just keeps on growing. So again, Amit, thanks so much for the conversation. Thanks for all the work that you're doing at the U of A. And I think next I'm going to do a little walk over to Invest in Canada. So again, thanks so much.
Okay, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure.
So we're going to do a quick little walk. I'm going to... There we go. Now I'm switching mics. So we're going to do a little walk over to Invest in Canada. Again, the exhibit floor we have here is pretty large. And so we were one of the first, again, because we helped plan this, we were one of the first organizations to book a space. So we've got some pretty prime real estate. And around us, yesterday you met with Explore Edmonton, who's right beside us. The Nikola truck, the hydrogen truck that came up from California, is also beside us. We've got the province of Alberta on one side. And then on the other here, we've got our friends at Invest in Canada. Oh, excuse me. Katie, nice to see you.
Hi, Chris. Good to see you.
Oh, let me just drop my mask on.
Oh,
so
yes.
This is Katie Curran, who's the acting CEO for Invest in Canada.
Hi. So good to see you. Excited to be here.
Nice to see you too.
Yes.
So Invest in Canada, you've
Yes.
got a huge footprint.
Yes. A lot of real estate right here.
A lot of real estate.
Yeah.
And really, you're kind of in the center of all the action.
Absolutely. Like we like to be.
Yeah, exactly. You're right beside us. You're right by the province. But you really are very much in the middle of all of this flow. How busy has the show been for you so far?
Oh, it's been fantastic. You can feel the excitement. We've had a steady stream of all sorts of companies and partners come by. It's been really fantastic for us. It's nice to be back out.
It is.
In person, in these live events again.
Yeah, totally. Would you be able to give us a quick tour?
Absolutely. Let's go
fantastic.
in.
So we're going to let the camera slide ahead of us.
For sure.
So what day did the team come in to start setting up?
They came in earlier this week. They came in around Monday, but this booth, we're really proud of it, and we're going to replicate this going forward. But it really gives that space for some close, client interactions here. We've got another private space around the corner as well. And then, of course, our main booth where people can come watch our fantastic videos.
Love the videos.
We love the videos. Yeah, I think that's been a really great feature for us, is being able to play some of our marketing material there.
Well, from a marketing perspective, you guys are 100% on
yes.
brand.
Yes.
Love just how much the red pops off
Yes.
this black.
Yes.
The great wood floors. It is really a beautiful booth.
Absolutely. We need to bring in elements. Of course, we have the natural resources. That is just Canada's brand. But when you compare it to then the hydrogen and the new exciting things that we have going on in Canada, I think that pairs really nicely together.
Absolutely. We're both in the business of basically selling the country. And,
absolutely.
From Edmonton Global, nobody knows who Edmonton is.
Right.
When you look out in the world. So we always start with Canada.
Yes.
So the work that your team is doing to build this international brand around
Yeah.
investing in Canada
Yeah.
is helping every single community
Excellent.
across the whole country.
Excellent. We really like to hear that. I think Canada's brand is very powerful in the world, but we need to make it even more powerful in the business community. They need to
Yeah.
think of Canada as the top investment destination. And I think we've made some inroads there. We've got still some more work to do, but very happy that our partners and we can work collaboratively with everybody to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've been very active in other parts of the world.
Yes.
I was in Dubai recently.
Yes.
The Canada Pavilion at Expo was
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes.
There's lots of work happening around the world.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a bit of a taste of some of the things you've been part of?
For sure. So we're really excited. We've done Expo Dubai, which was a
Yeah.
huge, massive success for us. We also are looking forward to two big things that are happening in Toronto at the end of June. We have PDAC and we have Collision, which
Yeah.
is really exciting.
We're there at Collision.
Excellent. Yeah, I think those are really big events for us. It's within Canada, but it draws such a big international
Yeah.
audience. Big investors are coming. Foreign companies are coming. So I think that'll be really good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know for us, we've talked a little bit about the goals of this conference.
Yes.
And we're so thrilled that you're here for year one.
Yes.
We've got a 10-year runway on this, a
Yes.
10-year deal with DMG. Already, this is the largest hydrogen conference in North America. We want this, and
Yeah.
it's going to be the largest hydrogen conference in the world.
Yeah.
We think within 5 years, probably 40 to 50,000 people is what we're aiming at. Can you just speak a little bit about Invest in Canada's commitment to hydrogen? And not just here, there's hydrogen plays across the country.
Absolutely. Hydrogen, of course, is a Government of Canada priority, and we see it as a massive investment opportunity for Canada. It helps all sorts of goals in terms of carbon reduction and getting to net zero. But it's really a new industry for Canada that I think has fantastic growth.
Yeah.
So we want to be, as Invest in Canada, we want to be at the foreground. So we want to be at these events, and we want to make a name for ourselves about hydrogen.
Love it. And we're 100% there with you.
Excellent.
Okay, I think that's probably it. We've got some
Excellent.
more shows back at our stage.
Sounds
but just
good.
again, want to say thanks so much for being
thank
here.
you.
Love what you guys are doing.
Excellent.
And let's go Canada.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to head back.
We've got our technology on our first commercial customer, KAG Canada, or West Can Transport, better known in Alberta. It's been rebranded recently, and we've got our dual fuel natural gas diesel blend technology on 6 of their trucks, and they've been in their commercial operations for the last few months, and we're here to celebrate that. In terms of a greener future.
And there's 2 key points here. Is one, today we can have an impactful reduction on GHG emissions from heavy duty trucking industry today, and WestCan is doing that today. The other key factor is that this is not cost prohibitive, and so fleets can actually see fuel savings, and for that reason the payout for this investment technology is very competitive.
Yeah, Alberta Innovates has been a great partner. Basically, we started the company in March of 2017, and by late 17 we already got a grant with Alberta Innovates on a project we were doing at the time, which basically spawned to where we are today. For us to hit the point here where we're launching commercialization and it's looking really good, I think that's the point of Alberta Innovates. They're investing money in companies like ours at the initial stages, mid stages. We grew from 7 to 14 employees during COVID, and we've got plans right now in an equity financing we're doing in the US. We're likely going to grow to 40, 45 people in the next 12 to 18 months. And without Alberta Innovates, we wouldn't have been able to do this.
And welcome back. I'm Chris McLeod with Edmonton Global. We're here at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention inside the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub exhibit. And it's there's a little bit of a lull in the crowd at the moment, so we may actually be able to hear each other talk. So I've got Leland Oberst, who's the CEO and founder of Innovative Fuel Systems. Leland, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's nice to have you here. you and I know each other. We've done a few things promoting the really incredible work that Innovative Fuel Systems is doing. For those who are joining us in person or online, can you just give us a bit of a run through on what your company does?
Sure, thanks, Chris. And Chris is being quite understated. Edmonton Global did an article on our company a year ago, and it helped us immensely secure contracts and investors. So thanks for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
So what our company does in the heavy-duty trucking space, Class 8 trucking space, we can get rid of around 45-50% of the diesel burn and run it on natural gas, CNG, compressed natural gas, renewable natural gas, or liquefied natural gas. And we're commercially ready right now. We've signed 3 contracts, and we've got trucks on the road right now.
Wow.
So the big benefits to companies or our customers is obviously there's an emissions reduction, so it's a cleaner burning fuel. Natural gas is a lot cheaper than diesel.
Yeah.
So that's a huge play there they're
Especially
excited
right now.
about. And I think the real important things to our customers is there's no loss of power at all. There's a reason companies choose to have diesel manufactured trucks, and power is critical. So no loss of power at all. So that's what we do today, and off to the races, which is exciting. And our next play is to add hydrogen to the mix with diesel.
Wonderful. And I think we'll talk about hydrogen in a second, but you jumped over the number kind of quick. So right now, what's the emission reduction you're achieving?
So from cradle to grave,
Yeah.
or full well cycle, on certain emissions we can get up to 40%.
Wow.
But the CO2 reduction, which everybody likes to hear about,
Yeah.
Carmen, is about 10%, 9-10% reduction. That's with the natural gas diesel blend. Yeah.
Okay. And that kind of investment would be made over the life cycle of a truck. So are you doing this with brand new vehicles? Are you retrofitting? Just give us a bit of sense of what your technology does.
Sure, that's a great question, actually, because the lifespan of most trucks are 50 to 20 years. But our focus from the beginning has been to work with companies like KAG Canada, formerly
Yeah.
WestCan, where they're turning over their trucks every 5 years. So we're working on newer trucks. And why that's important to the customers is their payback is much better.
Yeah.
So they've got a longer period payback, newer trucks. And the other important thing in how we've designed our system with the newer trucks is it's completely, even though it's a retrofit, it's completely non-intrusive. And this is critical for them because you can't impact the OEM's warranty.
Right. Oh, wow. So this doesn't impact the warranty at all?
No, it doesn't impact the warranty at all. And in fact, we've had most of the Alberta truck dealerships come to our shop to look at the technology to see how non-intrusive it is, so that when the KAGs of the world go in for servicing, they'll know how our system works, and if there's a problem, they know it's not us, that it's the diesel side. But if it is ours, it's fully warranted as well.
Okay.
But I think the critical thing is it's non-intrusive, and that's what's got the larger companies excited about our product.
Okay, so can you, again, I'm not the engineer, so let's not get into too technical, but can you kind of help me understand, is this fuel input? Is it inside the engine? At what stage are you introducing natural gas and eventually hydrogen?
So the natural gas is actually, and again, I'm not our chief technology officer, but what I can say, it actually combusts at the same time.
Okay.
So it's exactly the same time. So we've got injectors, obviously the tank where it comes from. We have to replace one of the diesel tanks and put in either a CNG or LNG tank.
Okay.
But everything comes through the injectors and into the cylinder at the same time.
Wow. And I know there's been a lot of investment across the province and really across North America on natural gas fueling, and diesel you can get anywhere for heavy haul. Is it pretty easy for big trucking companies to access natural gas right now?
Well, not as easy as diesel.
Yeah.
But we do have ACCO stations in Alberta. Clean Energy is actually building a station in Sherwood Park that's coming on board in June, and one in Calgary at the end of the year. And there's certain infrastructure sporadic around Alberta, some private infrastructure.
Yeah.
So it's not as good as diesel, but it's pretty decent. But the companies we're talking to, as we scale up, they're going to likely be building their own solution in their backyard, so they're right near their diesel stations.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Can you just talk maybe a bit about what's next? Because I know you've got natural gas right now that's up and running, blended to with diesel. I know you're working on hydrogen, but it's a bit of a chicken and egg. You need enough production of liquefied hydrogen to be able to use it, and your tech's really close, right?
Yeah, no, great question. It's funny because we've spent 4.5 years developing the CNG diesel blend now. And now hydrogen is, as we've seen in this conference, is starting to take off. But like you said, chicken and the egg, demand supply, we're on the demand side. What I will say is the patents that we filed are not natural gas diesel agnostic. They're actually multi-fuel. So it could be hydrogen, DME, whatever the fuel base. So we did that deliberately 2 years ago because we thought we knew where the world was going. So our methodologies, our algorithms, our codes, and our patents, basically the vision we have, we know that that'll basically be the same as for a hydrogen diesel mix. We just haven't concentrated the R&D in that to date because there's been no infrastructure.
Right.
But now with the infrastructure that looks to be built, and we're talking to a couple of groups, looks like things are going to be coming on board in the next couple of years. We're actually going to be starting our development right away on the hydrogen diesel blend.
Okay, fantastic. And we had a conversation earlier today with Air Products. Of course, they've got a gigantic, a $1.3 billion facility that they're building. We're hoping to get the groundbreaking to happen here pretty quick. One of the pieces with that is liquefied hydrogen, which is one of the fuels. Really what you need is the liquefied. Suncor and AMTA made an announcement right before lunch about a hydrogen fueling station that's going to be built in Edmonton that they're working on right now. So there's going to be a whole bunch of projects coming forward on fueling stations. So is that what you need? Like how diverse do you need that infrastructure to be before the trucking companies can really take off?
Well, I would say over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, as we launch our pilots in the hydrogen diesel space, we're working through how to remotely get the fuel to the trucking companies to pilot the trucks, and I think we'll get there. In terms of once we commercialize and start to scale up, there needs to be discussion and partnerships and exactly where strategically we put them, because a fleet that's got 3,000 trucks, they're going to want to know that they're going to want to fuel their whole fleet.
They need more than one station.
They're either going to do none or they're going to do all 3,000. They're not just going to do 5 or 10. So I think what I've heard in the last couple of days is the supply is going to come. So the demand side better be there.
Well, I think that's exactly what we're seeing. Supply is right on the edge of exploding, and what a lot of the supply side is saying, we need the demand. We're making huge investments, multi-billion-dollar investments, and so now at Edmonton Global, we're working darn hard to build out that demand. We're talking to companies like Mitsui, Toyota, Mitsubishi, many others. We've got trucks being built, buses being built, a whole bunch of things are all on hydrogen. So it's coming close. So hang in there. And I know you've got investors, in Canada. You've got investors in the U.S. I think Texas in particular. Can you just give us a bit of a sense of where you're at in terms of raises? And again, we've got a lot of money in the room. A lot of investors who come from around the world looking for companies to scoop up. Are you looking for investment still?
Sure. We've not closed a placement in Texas yet. Just we're talking to some groups though. So we've done a good job of raising money, pretty much Alberta money, to get us where we are today. And we're in the process as we put together our hydrogen consortium. We're putting a hydrogen consortium together right now with a couple fleets to actually help fund our development with the government as well. So there's a lot at play that if this conference was even 3 weeks later, I could share with you.
Oh, wow. So I was going to ask, what can you share about that?
So I'll get to that in a bit. But I think once we round that out, when we combine what we've got now that's commercially out there with what we're going to build over the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to be looking to raise some money to fund that and commercialize both sets of the business. In terms of the consortium, it's 3 companies. We've locked in 2, and there's a third we need to lock in.
Wow.
We've got the haulers of the hydrogen, potential hydrogen, and ultimately the suppliers. We've locked that in. We've locked those companies up as well that I can't release the names yet, but that'll be announced soon, which is really exciting.
Okay. Well, when you're ready to announce, let us know. We'd love to know and help amplify that.
Absolutely. And as part of that, too, we've been talking to different levels of the federal, provincial, municipal governments, and they all support it as well. And actually, with the launch of the Hydrogen Center of Excellence.
Yep.
Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Yesterday, which was fantastic news. I knew that was coming. I think a few of us did. And I think that'll be definitely beneficial for us. And they've been proactive reaching out to us, like Alberta Innovates already, where they can help. And they've been great to us in the past. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, Laura and the team at Alberta Innovates are amazing. You know, I'm there's so many things I want to ask you. Maybe the first one, you know, just to bridge to a slightly different topic. You're a really cool company. You've got a lot on the go. I know there's a ton of interest. Why are you here? I mean, we think the Edmonton region is the place to be. But, you know, what's kept you here? Why are you building the company here?
Well, first and foremost, I live here, born and raised, and I'm a proud Edmontonian. You know, people have asked me that, like, why haven't you moved it to sort of, I would say, more greener jurisdictions, if you will, like British Columbia or even Europe. And I always tell people the entrepreneurial spirit that my employees have are phenomenal. I don't think you can find it anywhere else. And quite frankly, even the cost, like our rent cost, cost of labor is quite decent in Alberta. And the entrepreneurial spirit, you can't beat it. And, you know, with some of the skilled engineers that we've been able to hire that's been in the patch, they bring a ton of value, ton of skills that are transferable into this change into alternative fuels. And like I said, the cost is great, and we're not leaving Edmonton.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. And one of the things we've been talking about a lot is just the talent that exists here. And you mentioned it briefly there as you talked about the engineers. And Alberta has more engineers per capita than any other province in the country. Edmonton, you know, just so many engineers. And not just engineers, but we've also got, I think, the second largest fabrication kind of fabricators of steel in North America. I think there's around Houston, there's the only spot with more. So that mix of tons of engineers, lots of fabrication, you know, we're a place that moves stuff because, you know, all kinds of things move through our region. So that supply chain logistics mixed with the talent and that kind of know how to build stuff probably makes a pretty great place to do what you're doing.
No, absolutely. There's nothing more I can really add there. The one thing I would say too is two of our engineers moved from actually Ontario, Southwestern Ontario. And actually their first days they started with us, I think I might have mentioned this to you before, Chris, was the day Prime Minister Trudeau shut the country down with COVID. So they started 2 years ago in March. So that was quite crazy. But, you know, I always say about Edmonton, people generally have trepidation, you know, moving from Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal to Alberta, particularly Edmonton. But once they get here and they bring their families, they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
So it's a great community. They're here to stay, and we've got a really good team.
Yeah, I love it. You know, we're veering off topic here a little bit, but you know, some of the studies that have come out, Edmonton is the most affordable major city in Canada. We've got above average wages. Commute times are next to nothing. You know, it's 20 minutes to get just about anywhere. Even though we're a region of 1.5 million people, it's pretty easy to get around. So that, again, cheap to live here, good pay, and the time, that's how you build a life. You know, some of the other places, and again, Canada's a wonderful country. There's lots of incredible cities, but it can be a little bit hard to actually, you know, take your kids to soccer and do all the activities, and you can do it here.
No, you're right, actually. And like I said, the folks that have moved from Ontario, they've said the same thing, even though we are a technology company. And I guess in theory, they say you can work from home. You know, we're working with trucks and engines, coding, the ECUs that go on the trucks. So being in our office is critical, and they want to be there. And they're 15, 20-minute drives, almost from where all of them live. And they live all over, you know, we're in Northwest Edmonton, our shop. But, you know, some of them live in the south, some live in the west. And you're right, it's they can't believe it. They don't have hour commutes, and people are coming in every day.
Wow, fantastic. So when you look ahead, you know, let's say 5 years for innovative fuel systems, what's the company going to look like?
In 5,
or 10. You pick a time where you say, this is what I'm trying to build.
I'll answer, your question was 5. You know, in 5 years from now, obviously we're going to have a lot of trucks on the road, a lot of diesel trucks on the road that are either have a natural gas diesel blend or hopefully a hydrogen diesel blend. And, you know, depending on the cost of hydrogen, where it gets to, could be mostly hydrogen, mostly natural gas. I don't know. I mean, a lot of that really depends on government policy. Yeah. And if it sticks or it changes, the cost of hydrogen and how quickly infrastructure gets built out, Chris. But what I will tell you, in 5 years, there will be thousands of trucks on the road that are reducing emissions and hopefully improving companies' margins as well.
Yeah, love it. Again, this is a global challenge. We need global solutions. Your company's already making a difference, and I think the world is your oyster in terms of where you can grow and what you can do next. Kind of final thoughts, final question. This is the day 2 of our first ever hydrogen convention. Already it's the largest one in North America. Any thoughts on the conference? Have you been on the strategic conference or the technical? Just your perspective would be great to hear.
Yeah, sure. I've not been to any of the technical courses. My chief technology officer has been to a lot of them, obviously. What I would say is there's a lot of great energy. I'm really impressed. A lot of great energy. It's funny. When I was in grade 11, our class took a field trip to Vancouver for Canadian Expo was in Vancouver, and Ballard had a booth, and they were talking about hydrogen.
Yeah.
So I raised that because hydrogen's not new, as you know.
Right.
But what I would say, listening to everybody on stage and just talking to people, this time it's real. It's gonna stick.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of work to do, but I think we've got the group in Edmonton, Alberta, and Canada to get there. And I think what the last 2 days, it's been very positive. There's some tough conversations that need to be held of what's realistic in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I think, at least I've noticed in the reception last night, those were had. Those don't happen on stage, I get it. But it's starting to foster those conversations. So I'm glad we did. I think this is a great job, everybody involved to putting it on. Very impressed.
Yeah, we're super, super happy with how this is going so far. The conference and the conversation with you. So thanks so much for coming down. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a few minutes with the next conversation here from the Canadian Hydrogen Convention and the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub exhibit. See you soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Welcome to the Synthetic Edmonton Region, a virtual environment where we model the future of low-carbon hydrogen for the next 25 years in the rapidly growing $2.5 trillion global market. The Edmonton region is located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands and gathering place of First Nations and Métis people. This region is fast becoming a North American launch point for the hydrogen economy and a global epicenter, attracting investment because of its ability to produce low-cost, zero-emissions hydrogen at a global scale. The province of Alberta produces more than 60% of Canada's hydrogen, with much of that production occurring in Alberta's industrial heartland. Unique geology and existing infrastructure suitable for carbon capture, utilization, and storage are enabling the production of net zero hydrogen and attracting investment from energy-intensive industries looking to meet global net zero commitments. The region is rich in talent, educated, and growing, with more engineers per capita than any other province and a global hub for artificial intelligence. The Edmonton region is home to 7 universities, colleges, and polytechnics, and 120,000 students. Proven by our history of building, operating, and maintaining energy infrastructure, our experienced workforce includes more Indigenous workers than any other province in Canada. To optimize hydrogen development in the Edmonton region and to help meet global demands for energy and emissions reduction, we are deploying advanced modeling and scenario-based intelligence we call synthetics to design success. Let's look ahead at hydrogen demand from the transportation sector, in particular, commercial and municipal fleets. In 2023, we begin to address the performance risk of hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles in our first pilots of zero-emission trucking along the Edmonton-Calgary corridor, the largest of 3 heavy transportation corridors in the region, accounting for up to 19,000 trucks per day. The first hydrogen fuel station will be located in an area supporting both commercial trucking and municipal fleets, and near new hydrogen production facilities, an efficient co-location strategy. This strategy allows us to assess demand acceleration scenarios with varying adoption rates of hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles and more inexpensive retrofits of hydrogen diesel dual-fuel trucks. While existing fleets are still in service, dual-fuel retrofit trucks reduce GHG emissions and range anxiety while rapidly building hydrogen demand. As demand grows and fleets are replaced, the number of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles continues to grow. By 2024, demand from as many as 200 fuel cell vehicles allows a cost advantage for hydrogen over diesel in a market of over 34,000 heavy-duty vehicles currently registered in the Edmonton region. 30 tons of liquid hydrogen is produced in the region every day, providing fuel for all of Western Canada's transportation demands. In 2028, hydrogen blending activities started in 2022 by ATCO are scaling. For example, 20,000 tons of hydrogen are being blended into the natural gas grid. Looking forward, an increasing number of natural gas boilers, stationary generators, and CHP units at building and industry sites will run on a mixture of natural gas and low-carbon hydrogen, contributing to their emissions reduction goals. From 2030 and beyond, heavy transportation shifts, displacing diesel. Several global-scale net zero hydrogen projects are complete, led by the first phase of Air Products' $1.3 billion facility. As new and repurposed pipelines are added to expand the existing network, costs of hydrogen at the pump will drop to as little as 1/3 of the anticipated cost at other hydrogen refueling stations around the world. As the hydrogen trunk line is built further south, it will supply and power more fuel cell vehicles, more buildings and industries, including Edmonton International Airport, part of Port Alberta, Western Canada's inland port, where air, rail, pipelines, and roadways converge in a logistics hub. The Edmonton International Airport extends its reputation as Canada's innovation airport, leading airport and airline decarbonization around the world. In the next decade, select countries import hydrogen to meet their demand. Japan, Germany, South Korea, and areas of the US, such as California, have multi-billion-dollar import potential. Countries and companies around the world look to the Edmonton region as a potential source for large-scale net zero hydrogen. Shell and Mitsubishi begin activating the Memorandum of Understanding signed in 2021 for producing hydrogen for export to Japan. Access to rail, pipelines, and transportation corridors currently figure centrally in existing energy export capability. The whole world needs to come together to significantly reduce our carbon footprint and contribute to a net zero future by 2050. The Edmonton region will play a leadership role in mitigating the catastrophic impacts of climate change through transitioning to a net zero carbon economy locally, as well as helping others achieve their climate objectives. From 2022 to 2050, we have radically transformed and grown our economy by attracting investment and providing up to $100 billion in economic value every year for the last 2 decades. The future is our focus, and the time to invest is now.
Welcome back. I'm Chris McLeod with Edmonton Global. We're here at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention, sitting inside the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub exhibit. And if you were joining us just over the last 5-6 minutes, you saw this amazing video about the future of the Edmonton region and the build out of our hydrogen economy from today to 2050. Now, we did a lot of work on that. There's information from a base case, there's information from a whole bunch of sources that have been baked into that. But to turn all that data into something I think is pretty magical was Run With It Synthetics. And we've got Myrna Bittner here, who's the founder and co-CEO. Myrna, first of all, thanks so much for that video. It is awesome.
I'm really glad you like it. We liked it too. Really fascinating to meet all of the people who are involved and engaged in accelerating hydrogen in the area, and wonderful to do some work in Canada. It was one of the kickoff projects that we are doing in Canada. Most of our work is international.
Yeah, and you know, I could spend the whole time just talking about that video and kind of how we built that and what's happening. But let's start by talking really about you and the team at Run With It Synthetics. So, you know, you just mentioned that most of the work you're doing is international. Can you just kind of explain what it is that you guys do?
Okay. I'll start back, but not really back at the beginning, because it's been a long running start, decades of kind of building a technology and a capability. But our company started 8 years ago, and we started by recognizing that the world was becoming really complex, and that these systems were kind of outstripping people's ability to contend with the realities that they were going to face until they faced them. And then it was almost too late. So there was a lot of firefighting and a lot of mistakes and inefficiencies. And so we built the capability to build synthetic realities. And these synthetic realities, we could focus on making them as realistic as possible with human behavior and activity and policy and environment and connected systems. And it wasn't very long until we were asked, well, can you do this in a city? And can you characterize a city or a region? And that started in 2019. And then in earnest, we have been building cities, which are actually systems of systems and regions, and dialing forward the future of those cities so people can prepare or mitigate or de-risk or even pursue really innovative opportunities and understand in a sandbox environment with the data that they need to support their decisions today, what the impacts are going to be tomorrow.
There is so much there to ask about. And I'm going to try to drill in a little bit, but you know, you're going to lose me quick if we get too much into the detail. So when you talk about building virtual environments, again, I know just from our experience with the videos and some of the work you've done for us, but for someone who's never seen your work, like they might be thinking, oh, like, you know, Second Life or video game kind of things. It is not that at all. It's really grounded in, I think, the reality of the systems that exist. Can you just maybe explain that a bit so that people have the right mental image?
Correct. So we really look for incorporating as much information as is available, and it's kind of a convergence idea. So we bring data and expertise and geospatial information and images and an understanding of how a city is built and its critical infrastructure and how that operates, and then we where part of our special sauce is that we are enabled by our technology to synthesize the population. So an actual SimCity type, living, reactive, responsive, intelligent population that is accurate for a region, but never identified. And so that is part of what enables us to then dial forward new energy behaviors, transportation choices, growth, density, how much water people consume today and maybe 10 years from now. But it also enables us to play forward the impact of policy. So policy change and incentives, our population can have psychographics that are accurate and based in research and can be quantified. And we can survey our populations as well. So that's one of the fun things that we do is when we dial forward these scenarios, and we've done some pretty challenging scenarios, such as disaster scenarios. We can actually survey our population to find out how they're feeling and what they're thinking, why they're making the choices that they have in ways that current technologies and current survey and current surveillance cannot capture. So it enables us to play forward the future and really understand in a quantified way what the impact of our choices are going to be.
Yeah, just fascinating. I'm sure there's urban planners who are listening to this or have heard you talk whose minds are blown as you talk about what's actually possible.
We are working with some here in the Edmonton region as well. So
Wow.
yes, yeah.
So maybe let's talk then about, where are some of the places you're doing work?
So we had a really interesting experience because when we started in cities, we started at the top of the Electric Power Research Institute in the U.S. And that was our second major city was Phoenix in the U.S. doing a dual disaster. And then during COVID, it really liberated our ability to reach around the world without having to travel because we were a small and growing team. So a lot more time on our hands. So we got involved in Kuala Lumpur, for example, with the Toyota Mobility Foundation, really characterizing how they were going to meet their 2040 targets, which involved decarbonization, but also involved really strenuous targets about SDG and economic access and accessibility and inclusivity. And so we did mobility models of the city of Kuala Lumpur last year as well. Then we've done some work in Europe, so Switzerland and Germany, and a lot of work in the United States. And we're starting in LATAM.
Okay. Well, I know there's been a couple times where I've reached out to you, to ask for, advice or connections or project updates.
Yeah.
I think we've been on calls from where you've been on call. You've been in like California, Washington, I think Portugal, Grenoble, France. It seems like every time we talk, you're someplace else. So I'm glad you're here.
Yes. Yeah. Last couple of weeks was Houston and Denver and Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Which Washington, D.C. was one of our the pinnacle achievements for our team lately. It was a huge environment that we did, synthesizing the Eastern Coast as well as Washington, D.C. for two handfuls worth of government agencies in the U.S., as well as the grid operators. And what they're trying to figure out how to contend with is some really severe solar weather. And so they were using a brand new launched product that we have, which is a synthetic tabletop. And they were using that to play forward scenarios where they had input all of their expert data and models, and they were wanting to understand the future of the grid and whether or not they could mitigate it, and with what data and information and what processes they would need to save us all.
Yeah. So, just trying to comprehend that. The data sets must be gigantic then, if you're looking at all those different pieces.
They are, and that's again one of the things that we have developed with our technology is the ability to ingest those data sets, integrate them, connect them, augment them with the synthetic data, so the data that's missing from scenarios that haven't happened yet, or that's missing just in general because it hasn't been collected, or that's missing because it's hidden behind regulatory doors and process. And so we augment that, and then we have the ability to visualize it in very efficient ways and very powerful ways.
Yeah, it's really powerful. So how do you do that then? You must be using AI or machine learning or something to kind of dive into that data.
We do. We have a really deep tech stack that we have been working on for a few decades now that's finally kind of reaching its glory. Part of it comes from a neural net and 3D visualization research company that we had in the 90s. So it's not just fresh out of the box. But yes, there's a lot of artificial intelligence. We work towards making that all explainable because when we invite people into the room to examine some of these really critical issues and the future of a city and the future of a hydrogen, for example, in the Edmonton region, we really want them to have the confidence in how we have created models to generate missing data, how we have integrated models of others and of experts. So we have focused always on making that really explainable. But yes, there is some really interesting AI back there.
Yeah. Okay. I think years ago I did a little bit of work in disaster things, and they're looking at modeling. It was mostly maps with highlighters showing where danger might be.
Yes.
This is way more advanced than that.
This is, yes. And I think one of the interesting things is about why we're here today for hydrogen and the changing planet that we exist in is that all of these technologies and these advancements in sustainability also offer the opportunity to partner those advancements with resilience. And when we look at these disaster scenarios, it's really important that we characterize and understand how these new technologies can add to that and contribute to our resilience as a society.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I mean, we talk a lot about the role of talent in investment attraction.
Yes.
And we've got some real, especially the University of Alberta, but we've got 8 universities, colleges, polytechnics, somewhere between 120 and 140,000 students, which is almost 10% of the total population of this region, which is pretty amazing. But the U of A, their computer science department is the best in the world. Top 1, top 2. Their artificial intelligence research is consistently number 1, number 2, for 25 years. Is that talent pool really what's also helping your company just grow and thrive?
Yes, and more than just that talent pool, because we hire a really diverse group of experts. So we have engineers in civil, environmental, mechanical, electrical, comp-sci, human behavior specialists, 3D animation, and I think this is all part of the design of companies in the future too. Is having that diverse talent pool. It gives us opportunities. I think, and the U of A is also renowned, because of being in an energy society as well, and an energy-focused area of the world, in producing that engineering talent, which we absolutely love and take advantage of. Which brings me also to Edmonton Hydrogen and the work we're doing.
Yeah, eventually we have to talk about hydrogen.
Eventually we do, yes. And the work we're doing in the workforce and modeling the workforce and the future of that workforce also heavily relies on that talent pool.
Yeah.
And in a few ways is just spectacular for Edmonton and the future of Edmonton. The opportunities it offers, that talent pool for the young workforce who in 2040 is going to be predominantly starting their careers in hydrogen and then advancing in hydrogen. The number of clean tech jobs and growth in clean tech jobs that our post-secondary institutes are aligning with, their programs with. In 2040, I think we were estimating there was going to be about 49,000 clean tech jobs versus, traditional energy jobs, which would be about 17,000. So
wow.
those rates are going to really outstrip, I think, traditional jobs, and we're really well positioned with the talent generators that we have in our post-secondaries here to meet that need and that demand.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm glad you pulled us into hydrogen, because I could ask probably 1,000 questions about what you guys are up to. Can you maybe just talk about, again, you've talked about the talent piece that you're undertaking on behalf of the whole region. What's some of the other work you're doing around synthetic modeling in hydrogen? I know talent's one. There's other areas, though, too.
Yeah, so we were looking at workforce, we were looking at economy, we are looking at the growth of Edmonton and what that means, because as hydrogen is kind of being infused into our city, there's also this expansion or this growth of the population, and what does that mean with how we can look forward and prepare and attract and retain those clean tech workers. Some of the other work we're doing around hydrogen modeling is around the transportation sector. So really understanding, who and how and when adoption will happen. It's not always a rational economic choice when these big disruptive changes are happening. So part of the psychographic work that we do and being able to characterize people and how they perceive risk, we can also connect that with the labor force that's available, and have we prepared in that way the people to maintain those trucks, the people that have the knowledge to drive those trucks, the infrastructure and the people who work at those fueling stations. That all works into that adoption risk of the people who are looking at planning their fleets, and that more rational economic choice of, have we incented hydrogen to the price where it makes sense for them.
Yeah. And again, you're a company that, you've had other companies, now you've got Run Through Synthetics.
Yes.
You've already won a ton of awards, though, despite being only, 3 years old. So awards and recognition, can you give just a little sample of what's been happening?
Oh, wow. One of our favorite awards was the Most Edmonton Company last year, which was really designed to highlight a company that had impact and was also, highly focused on diversity and equity and inclusivity. We're a women-led company. We have a high percentage of women as a part of our team, even though we are a deep tech company. And we're also a certified Aboriginal business through my co-founder. And that's really important for us to highlight, the art of the possible. Second, well, unless I'm on an international stage, we won the global call of the United Nations for the Industry Development Organization for decarbonizing growing urban environments, which recognize the work that we've done around the world in cities as they're planning decarbonized mobility and transportation, and also recognize the work that we have done towards SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals in those cities. Taiwan's Top Technology Gold Medal Award was a real surprise, but a very welcome surprise. We've been co-winners with the Electric Power Research Institute into the AF Works Innovation Showcase. And I'm probably missing
I'm
about
sure you're
20
missing
others. But 2021 was a great year for us.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask that question first, because the next question is, companies that are in the startup, scale-up stage are always looking for capital. We've got investors here from all over the world, many of them coming looking for joint ventures, for all kinds of partnerships, looking for companies to do work on projects. Are you looking for investment funding? Where are you at?
Yeah, so we've had an interesting kind of trajectory happen in probably the last 6 months. So we've already booked more revenue in 2022 than well over the amount that we had in 2021, and we've always been a profitable revenue-funded company, which is also an interesting kind of oddity for AI companies. But that has kind of pushed us into making a choice, and so we've got a data room that we're preparing. I presented at the National Renewable Energy Labs Industry Growth Forum 2 weeks ago. I was in Denver, and we're preparing to open a round. We can be careful about the partners that we choose for that round, but there's so much that we're leaving on the floor that I think investment would help us grow into, and that's coming.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
I know from our perspective, we've been blown away by the work you're doing. Every time we show it off, we've got more people asking, how do we be part of this? How do we help build out the models around our community? And I know that that's happening in other communities around the world. So you probably won't be able to grow fast enough, would be my bet.
That would be wonderful.
Okay. Well, again, thanks so much. I know you're up for an award tonight, speaking of awards.
Yes.
So best of luck with that.
Oh,
I think
thank you.
we all have our fingers crossed that you're going to win yet one more. And then the other thing I want to ask you, we're here again at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention. It's the first time we've ever hosted this.
Yes.
Already it's the largest hydrogen convention in North America. We've got a goal to build it into the largest hydrogen convention in the world within 5 years. We're hoping to have about 50,000 people here in 5 years. We're going to need a bigger facility, but we're planning on having it here. Just wondering, if we brought you back in 5 years to do the same kind of a talk, do you have a sense of where you're going to be?
That's a really fascinating question, and I see a lot of big blank walls around. So we're doing part of what we have developed is a 3D immersive tabletop. That's what we launched in Washington, and Washington D.C. got to see itself experiencing a coronal mass ejection event. So I would really like to see a 3D immersive Edmonton
Something more
region.
positive than disasters.
Yes, transitioning into hydrogen so that people can actually walk through it, step in it, look at it, interact with the data, and understand the power of information and bringing science and techno-economic modeling and hydrogen and supply chains and people out of reports that sit on people's desks and into a living, understandable reality. So that's where I want this could be big enough, this hall, for that.
Okay. Wow, one hall for just your exhibit.
Sure.
Let's do that. Okay,
Let's
so
shoot for
Myrna,
it.
thanks so much for being part of this. Again, I've said it probably 8 times, but we're just huge fans of the work that you're doing, and we look for good partners to work with, and you guys are at the top of the list. You're really amazing.
Well, thank you.
Both you and the whole team.
Thank you to Edmonton Global for giving us this opportunity. It's been amazing.
Well, it's our pleasure. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more. Next one, we're talking about global collaborations and innovation, and we've got the European Canada Commission on Innovation as well as Innovate Norway. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
Welcome to the synthetic Edmonton region, a virtual environment where we model the future of low-carbon hydrogen for the next 25 years in the rapidly growing $2.5 trillion global market. The Edmonton region is located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands and gathering place of First Nations and Métis people. This region is fast becoming a North American launch point for the hydrogen economy and a global epicenter, attracting investment because of its ability to produce low-cost, zero-emissions hydrogen at a global scale. The province of Alberta produces more than 60% of Canada's hydrogen, with much of that production occurring in Alberta's industrial heartland. Unique geology and existing infrastructure suitable for carbon capture, utilization, and storage are enabling the production of net zero hydrogen and attracting investment from energy-intensive industries looking to meet global net zero commitments. The region is rich in talent, educated, and growing, with more engineers per capita than any other province and a global hub for artificial intelligence. The Edmonton region is home to 7 universities, colleges, and polytechnics, and 120,000 students. Proven by our history of building, operating, and maintaining energy infrastructure, our experienced workforce includes more Indigenous workers than any other province in Canada. To optimize hydrogen development in the Edmonton region and to help meet global demands for energy and emissions reduction, we are deploying advanced modeling and scenario-based intelligence we call synthetics to design success. Let's look ahead at hydrogen demand from the transportation sector, in particular, commercial and municipal fleets. In 2023, we begin to address the performance risk of hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles in our first pilots of zero-emission trucking along the Edmonton-Calgary corridor, the largest of 3 heavy transportation corridors in the region, accounting for up to 19,000 trucks per day. The first hydrogen fuel station will be located in an area supporting both commercial trucking and municipal fleets, and near new hydrogen production facilities, an efficient co-location strategy. This strategy allows us to assess demand acceleration scenarios with varying adoption rates of hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles and more inexpensive retrofits of hydrogen diesel dual-fuel trucks. While existing fleets are still in service, dual-fuel retrofit trucks reduce GHG emissions and range anxiety while rapidly building hydrogen demand. As demand grows and fleets are replaced, the number of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles continues to grow. By 2024, demand from as many as 200 fuel cell vehicles allows a cost advantage for hydrogen over diesel in a market of over 34,000 heavy-duty vehicles currently registered in the Edmonton region. 30 tons of liquid hydrogen is produced in the region every day, providing fuel for all of Western Canada's transportation demands. In 2028, hydrogen blending activities started in 2022 by ATCO are scaling. For example, 20,000 tons of hydrogen are being blended into the natural gas grid. Looking forward, an increasing number of natural gas boilers, stationary generators, and CHP units at building and industry sites will run on a mixture of natural gas and low-carbon hydrogen, contributing to their emissions reduction goals. From 2030 and beyond, heavy transportation shifts, displacing diesel. Several global-scale net-zero hydrogen projects are complete, led by the first phase of Air Products' $1.3 billion facility. As new and repurposed pipelines are added to expand the existing network, costs of hydrogen at the pump will drop to as little as 1/3 of the anticipated cost at other hydrogen refueling stations around the world. As the hydrogen trunk line is built further south, it will supply and power more fuel cell vehicles, more buildings and industries, including Edmonton International Airport, part of Port Alberta, Western Canada's inland port, where air, rail, pipelines, and roadways converge in a logistics hub. The Edmonton International Airport extends its reputation as Canada's innovation airport, leading airport and airline decarbonization around the world. In the next decade, select countries import hydrogen to meet their demand. Japan, Germany, South Korea, and areas of the US, such as California, have multi-billion-dollar import potential. countries and companies around the world look to the Edmonton region as a potential source for large-scale net zero hydrogen. Shell and Mitsubishi begin activating the Memorandum of Understanding signed in 2021 for producing hydrogen for export to Japan. Access to rail, pipelines, and transportation corridors currently figure centrally in existing energy export capability. The whole world needs to come together to significantly reduce our carbon footprint and contribute to a net zero future by 2050. The Edmonton region will play a leadership role in mitigating the catastrophic impacts of climate change through transitioning to a net zero carbon economy locally, as well as helping others achieve their climate objectives. From 2022 to 2050, we have radically transformed and grown our economy by attracting investment and providing up to $100 billion in economic value every year for the last 2 decades. The future is our focus, and the time to invest is now.
Welcome back. I'm Chris McLeod with Edmonton Global, and we're here at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention inside the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub booth. Now this whole presence, everything we're doing with the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub has really been a massive collaboration of all of the municipalities that are here in our region, the federal government, the provincial government, a number of First Nations and industry. And that theme of collaboration really is what our next conversation is about. So it's really great that we've got Britta Barron, who's the president of the European Canadian Centre for Innovation and Research, and Hamid Shirazi, who's a senior advisor with Innovate Norway. Because again, it's not just about how do we do collaboration here. If we're going to solve the climate crisis and really have hydrogen take off as one of the solutions, we need to work together. So can you maybe, Britta, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what do you do, and then we'll kind of get into more next.
Okay. So my name is Britta Barron, and I'm the president of a small organization based here in Edmonton, covering, however, not just Alberta, but also Canada more broadly, called the European Canadian Centre for Innovation and Research. And the idea is that we are offering help, various mechanisms of help to support companies who want to go international. And not so much for export, but really for product development, for learning about new solutions, for finding partners, for finding new talent, for finding access to capital, whatever it is that promotes your business and that your business needs. We are helping companies to find that in Europe.
Okay, wonderful. And Hamid, how about Innovate Norway?
Well, what we do is we give local ideas global opportunities, and I guess a part of that is about collaboration and building bridges. So I mainly help Norwegian companies and ecosystems and clusters to establish and grow their collaboration or business in Canada.
And I know you've brought a whole bunch of Norwegian companies here. Can you just give us a sense of the delegation that's come?
Yes, the delegation has a deep expertise in hydrogen and carbon capture. We have companies that are different players in the value chain of hydrogen and carbon capture. And I don't know if we get a chance to discuss later, but Norway has invested a lot over the past 10, 20 years or so in different aspects of sustainability and clean tech and green energy. So we are here to explore collaboration opportunities.
That's great, and we're happy to have you here too. Okay. We've got, I think, about 19 delegations from different countries around the world. I think the Norway group is actually one of the larger ones.
Yes.
And so it's, for those who are here in Edmonton, they'll know that we got a little snow this morning. Yes. So at least we know that the Norwegian delegation is pretty comfortable with that. They probably felt like they're back at home.
In Norway, there is a saying that there is never bad weather, it's bad clothing. So as long as we got the right jacket, we're good.
Yeah, we say that here too. The other thing we say is if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, because I think it's nice out now. So Britta, can you maybe talk a little bit about how to kind of make that idea of innovation and collaboration real? Like, what are maybe some examples of what companies or universities or others could be doing?
Yeah, to start off with, start off with saying that yes, indeed, we are not only aiming at companies, but academic institutions, non-for-profits, NGOs. We would also help them. We'll work with them. And good examples are really some. We had a focus group meeting yesterday because we want to understand better, also at larger scale, what is it that motivates companies to go international and what holds them back. And usually the story of how they went international starts A, with personal experience and personal background, and B, with a problem. I have a problem and it's damn difficult. I can't find the solution. And I'm looking elsewhere for that solution, for that partner company that brings me that technology that I don't have and that will speed up my access to market and my product development. Or I find that partner who will help my distribution system. I can use his or her distribution system in a given country. Often these partnerships go multi-layered. They start on a particular access to a particular technology, and then they go like, and then we discovered we could also use that partner for distribution, and then we discovered we can actually buy that partner, which with some of our stories happen that way, that they actually then end up buying the partner in Europe, or the other way around, frankly.
It's there's so many things that you said that are really interesting. But I'm going to go back. You said they start with. I think often the beginning of that though is making the decision to look international, and Alberta in particular we've been really fortunate that so much of our industry, is happening here. There's so many things happening. There's so much money that's been here thanks to oil and gas, but it's meant that we often haven't looked at the rest of the world, and so it makes me, we're constantly having conversations with people about saying, yes, your customer can be next door, but your customer could also be in Norway. Your partner could be in France. Your partner could be in Asia. But making that decision sometimes is the hard part. So if you go prior to how you said start, what do you do, or how do you encourage people to actually think about this as being a possibility?
Well, that's exactly what we're now trying to find out. What are the mechanisms that trigger the interest? We heard from somebody yesterday that really necessity is the mother of all invention. Yeah. If I really have a awkward problem and I don't have the comfort level of ample government funding, then I'm going to scratch my head, and then I'm trying to look for that other solution that often enough is then abroad. So to motivate and to encourage that confidence that yes, I can find the solution abroad, and that it will give me the competitive edge. And it will, really promote my company. We heard fantastic success stories, and we have them in our reports. For what I have seen, there's not a single company that has worked with us. Once they work with us, they all love it, and they all find, really great usefulness in opening up internationally. It's to get them there, as you have mentioned.
Starting the process.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So, Hamid, I'm curious. Are there things we should be learning from Norway around that internationalization, collaboration, looking at the world, or does Norway have a similar challenge that often we have here in Canada?
I think there are a lot of similarities between Norway and Canada, particularly Alberta. First of all, we both have a long established history in the oil and gas, so we are global energy players. The differences is in Alberta, a lot of the oil and natural gas resources are under the ground. In Norway is under the seabed. So there are opportunities and differences. What's happening is with the focus on internationalization, you see also similarities that a lot of companies in Norway are small and entrepreneurial. So they have to try and experiment. So there are a lot of technical know-how. And again, very similar to a lot of companies that operate in Alberta. There are a lot of advantages, in my opinion, that comes when companies are small. They can move fast, they can experiment better, and they have lower overhead expenses. But with that also comes limited resources. Usually, when it comes to innovation, the talent, the capital, the infrastructure, the tools, they are not always accessible locally. And in my experience, what could be a challenge for a company might have been a challenge for another company 3, 5, 10 years ago. So by staying curious and look outside our borders and technological or business domains, we can learn a lot to minimize mistakes and failures. It's unavoidable. We will all have to go through that, but we can make it faster and easier.
Okay. I love that. It sounds really like the mentality that we've got here. It's a really great answer, and it's nice to know that Norway's got a lot of the same, feeling around, the value of startup and collaboration and funding innovation. So if we shift a little bit into hydrogen, again, we're here for this hydrogen show. What do you see happening inside, whether it's your partner organizations, within your own organization, inside your ecosystems? What's coming next from this?
Well, we are always looking into Europe and what's happening in the European energy market. And I think a lot of the people here, either directly or indirectly, are influenced by the sad circumstances that have completely redefined the energy agenda in Europe.
Absolutely.
And obviously hydrogen is big, big, big. I remember a year ago I started a conversation in another part of Canada, in Ontario, around hydrogen, and it was like, hydrogen? Why hydrogen? Nobody is asking that question anymore. It's utterly clear to anybody how much hydrogen is a key part of the answer to the newly defined energy crisis and energy challenge.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I think one of the factors that we should be mindful of is when it comes to Canada, compared to Norway, of course, it's such a large country. And with that vast amount of land that we have, there are many regional differences. So when it comes to hydrogen implications and applications, we have to look at those differences. For example, if you look at some of the eastern provinces, they have a much higher ratio of hydroelectric. Then you come to Ontario, there is a high ratio of hydroelectric and nuclear. Then we don't have much nuclear in other places. So we have to see what agenda we are pursuing. But for example, speaking of Norway, Norway has one of the highest concentration of electrical vehicles on the planet. So they have planned to reduce emissions from transportation. For example, when you look at the seaways and ferry transportation, they have invested a lot in hybrid technologies to eliminate the need for diesel engines. And also they are now moving to hydrogen ferry. So there is a lot to be learned from other jurisdictions. If you look at in Canada, and Alberta is a major producer of hydrogen. So we have to think about how we could look at other countries that are more mature and more evolved in a hydrogen value chain to look after the transport of hydrogen or carbon storage or carbon utilization. And those regional variations and differences is what dictates the more prime opportunity. So I think it's a mistake that we kind of have a one-size-fits-all for Canada. We have to kind of be very focused on regional differences and see where we can have the greatest impact.
Yeah, again, great point. You know, we're looking with and working with some of the companies like Air Products and Suncor and and ATCO and you can go on and on and on with the companies that are really investing in the production side. It's a real mix of primarily natural gas, trying to get to net zero. There's also some green, whether it's electrolysis or others. We had a conversation yesterday with David Lazelle from the Transition Accelerator, and he talked a lot about it's really about energy. So if you just think about energy and then the splitting of carbon away from it, that's kind of it's a different way to think about what's the problem, and then it's how do you make use of the carbon in other ways, whether it's sequestration or black carbon or carbon nanotubes. So do you have a sense of what's happening around kind of that innovation ecosystem around pulling the value out of the energy and then trying to actually do something with the carbon?
I can't say that we have been involved with those conversations to any large extent, but I do know that obviously, and that's a good example where we could come in and help with screening the landscape in Europe, both from a research point of view but also from a corporate point of view. Where do we see all the kernels of the answer? That is obviously a very complex and multifaceted answer. Yeah. But I think it's about time that we take internationalization really seriously and really consider as a key part of any meaningful industrial strategy.
Any thoughts to me?
I think if you look at business growth or innovation projects, it's never a random process. So if we somehow deconstruct that innovation process, we'll see that it always requires management commitment, and with management commitment and planning comes resource allocation. So we can see what are the priorities, how we are aligning ourselves with national policies or environmental, compliance requirements, and that dictates what kind of investment we want to have in technology, processes, or people. Usually it's maybe a combination of scenarios, but again, in a situation like we are now, and I guess the previous speaker mentioned, the problems that we are tackling are larger and more complex. That brings us to new solutions and also greater collaboration among multi-stakeholders to be able to focus on impact. I guess in Canada, we have a large history of doing a lot of pilots and testing, but it is now the time to focus on scale and impact.
Yeah, completely. So, knowing that's the focus, and I agree that should be the focus now, I'm curious just to flip that around a bit. What's the focus of this Norwegian delegation that's here? You've got a whole bunch of companies. You're here with Innovate Norway. What's the goal?
The goal is to see what's happening in Canada, and this is not the first time that Norwegian delegation has come. Norway has great interest in Canada, and we see great similarities, and we see that we have a policy direction about green energy. We have the know-how, and we have the capital to do something about it. We are visiting industrial heartland in Edmonton tomorrow to see what's going on with all these massive pipeline here to capture carbon and transfer and store that under the ground as a way of preventing it from getting to the atmosphere. In Norway, again, I mentioned that they do it under the seabed, but also there are great projects that they are looking at carbon removal and storage as a service. A lot of industries don't have own resources to deal with that, so we see opportunities for a lot of Norwegian players that maybe could come to Canada and look at industrial operations to see how we can manage. You keep doing what you do, but we see if we can help you to properly manage and reduce the carbon emissions.
Okay, wonderful. And in Britain, again, we have many companies, many visitors here from across Europe, many Canadians as well. Do you have can you share any of the goals that you know from either your own organization or the companies that you're working with around why they're here, what's brought them?
I'd say they are beginning to discover Canada as a player on the hydrogen agenda. I think Europe was a bit self-absorbed so far, and probably not entirely unfairly so, because a lot of the R&D has been promoted in Europe quite successfully at a large scale. But all the best R&D in Europe cannot come to market without the product. And of course, Europeans are looking for hydrogen in Canada.
Absolutely.
They just need the product.
Okay. And we're just about out of time. So, if you had kind of final thoughts, either on innovation or on collaboration, what would you want people to be thinking about?
I can only repeat and really emphasize, it is the smart way to look for others, people's input, not try to think you can do it all by yourself. Reach out to partners, of course reach out to partners in Canada, but reach out to partners as systematically and in as structured way as possible. Use all the great resources that are out there. We are only just one tiny element of a large landscape of internationalization resources. And I think all our previous clients have found it not only beneficial, but also great fun. And that is also a good part of it.
Got to have some fun.
That's a great point. And what I would like to add to that is innovation is about identifying and mitigating risks. And there are a lot of risks that's attached with the market, with the technology and operations. And I can say that there are many companies in Norway that have gone through that process, and we can learn from each other and do business with each other more than before. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Again, thanks so much for coming. I hope you're really enjoying the show. There's so much going on, from the technical stream to the strategic stream, just the energy and the exhibit. Although I think we're getting close to the end of the day, it's slowing down just a hair in here. I can actually hear myself think at the moment where I couldn't earlier. But again, just want to say thanks so much, and really enjoy the conversation. And hope you have a great rest of the show and enjoy those tours of the Industrial Heartland.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much indeed.
You're very welcome. Okay, so we're going to take another quick break. We've got a little video we're going to play, and then we'll be back with a conversation around diesel, hydrogen, and heavy haul. So see you soon.
Hello, my name is Kate Chisholm. I have the privilege of serving as Capital Power's Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer.
Well, hi, Kate. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today. Can you just begin by briefly describing Capital Power, what it does in general, but also what it does specifically in the hydrogen space, if you don't mind?
Sure. Capital Power is a publicly traded independent power producer. We're headquartered in Alberta, but we have over 6,400 megawatts of capacity located in 26 plants all around North America, and we have 4 more in development. So we're very growth oriented, and we are very future oriented. In fact, our purpose is to provide to power the world sustainably for generations to come. And so we work very hard on reducing emissions from thermal generation and expanding North America's renewable portfolio as well. On specifically in hydrogen, Tim, Capital Power actually sees the pathway to 2050 as being sort of a linear journey from carbon capture, utilization, and storage through to hydrogen and net carbon neutral power grid. And so we've been working on emission reduction from thermal generation since 2007. We've had a number of CCUS projects. And you might know that CCUS is one of the 2 main ways that we produce hydrogen for energy production. One way is through the electrolysis of water, and we expect that getting closer to 2050 and 2035 to 2050, that will be the main way of producing hydrogen for power consumption. But between now and then, we believe that more hydrogen will be produced from CCUS, which is, as I said, carbon capture, utilization, and storage.
How are you seeing the hydrogen space in Edmonton and Alberta specifically, but also Canada at large, evolving? And how do you see that playing out over the coming years?
Above all, it's important to note that there are some incredibly keen, brilliant minds working on hydrogen all over Canada. But in Edmonton and in Alberta specifically, there are some really cool projects. For example, the province announced earlier this summer that they were going to donate money to Air Products' $1.3 billion hydrogen complex. And so there is already a momentum going on to make Alberta sort of a hydrogen hub for Canada. There are lots and lots of people at both of our major universities are focused on this directly. In addition, there are really cool investments being made. And so, for example, on Monday, I took part in an announcement in which the province was providing money to CP Rail, which is sort of an unexpected source for some of this work. And what they've done is they are retrofitting 2 locomotives. They've already done 1 to be powered with hydrogen. And these locomotives are going to carry freight trains between Calgary and Edmonton and Lethbridge, completely emission free. And so this is a pilot program, but they're hoping that as they gain experience with this, they will be able to sort of decarbonize the entire freight rail system in Canada. And so I'm very excited by the fact that a lot of this really cool work is happening right here in Calgary, in Edmonton, and Alberta. A lot of the technology to produce hydrogen or to produce carbon, to capture carbon and make fuels like hydrogen is already there, but the demand isn't there. And so what we need to do is create that demand. And so, for example, in the CP Rail example, my understanding is that they're using water electrolysis to create hydrogen in Calgary, but they're using CCUS to create their hydrogen in Edmonton. And it is our hope that people will want to have their goods transported by hydrogen-fueled locomotives, hydrogen-fueled trains.
You've mentioned CCUS, or carbon capture, utilization, and storage, a few times already. And it is, as you've said, critical to the whole hydrogen equation and roadmap. How attractive is Canada's CCUS space to foreign investors? It is a space that we have developed some experience and expertise in. Is that being recognized on the global space and attracting FDI to Canada?
It's important for the audience to understand that CCUS is really important from a decarbonization perspective because it's so far the only sort of type of technology that will both avoid emitting new carbon into the atmosphere, but also potentially remove carbon from the atmosphere through direct air capture. strangely enough, let's say, there are a lot of investors, especially outside of Canada and the US, that understand maybe better than some Canadians and Americans that we don't hate necessarily fossil fuels. What we hate is the carbon emissions from them, the greenhouse gas emissions from them. And so to the extent that we can burn fossil fuels without emitting greenhouse gases, that's sort of a win-win, because there are areas of the world, Canada and the US included, Russia's another one, where there is abundant fossil fuel, which could keep the cost of decarbonization low if only we could make it more environmentally friendly. And so there are ESG investors, for example, in Europe that understand this very well, and they are very interested in our progress here in terms of propelling decarbonization using CCUS. And when they do that, they rely on the fact that there are industry experts like the International Environmental Agency and others that are saying that CCUS, along with an expansion in renewables, energy efficiency, et cetera, are sort of the keys to getting to that 2050 net carbon neutral point. Now, as far as Canada is concerned, of course, our record for human rights and some of the social problems is very good, but we're also becoming an environmental leader. And so there is, as far as Canada is concerned, growing group not only of ESG investors directly investing in responsible companies, but they're also placing pressure on the banks, for example, to consider ESG considerations into their financing. They're placing pressure on insurance companies to consider ESG in their assessment of business risks. And they're also placing a lot of pressure on credit rating agencies to consider ESG considerations in their business risks and their assignment of credit ratings. And so all of this is coming together to a point where ESG considerations are at least as important to many investors, financiers, risk managers as the financial ones. And we like that trend. We think that's the right thing for Canada and the world.
When you look at Edmonton and Canada, in terms of our competitive advantages for attracting FDI to the hydrogen space, to the carbon capture, utilization and storage space, what stands out in terms of our USPs or where we compete best?
Let's be frank. Alberta has a burning platform. We need to figure this out. And because of that, we have attracted some of the best minds in the world in order to help us address the energy transition problem and to help us over time convert what has been a heavy emitter of greenhouse gas into what we hope will be low or no carbon industry. And so we have a lot of expertise here. We also have the desire to be the world leader. In terms of hydrogen, for example, and CCUS, we have in Alberta geology that will allow us to capture and sequester both carbon and hydrogen. Hydrogen storage is a bit of a long putt at the moment because hydrogen has a very low volumetric density, and so it's hard to capture and it's very expensive to store. And it's also harder to move through pipelines at the moment, at least through our existing pipeline system, because it's caustic and it burns at very low temperatures and there are safety concerns. But we have the people that are working on all of these problems and figuring out how to move hydrogen through pipelines, how to store and then store captured carbon and then use it to create hydrogen and so on. And so I think probably along with our desire to solve this problem, the biggest advantage we have is so many really, really great brains focused on it at the moment.
Kate, we're going to wrap up, but I want to know what you think has to be done and by who to accelerate Canada's hydrogen opportunity, but also to attract more foreign investors into our hydrogen sector.
Well, thanks, Tim. At a high level, three things need to happen. First of all, we need policy to settle down. You heard me talk about the size of some of the investments that are needed. When you're making a $2 billion or a $5 billion or a $3 billion investment that you hope to live over decades, your shareholders would assassinate you if you did that irresponsibly. And so what you need to do is to have some confidence in your project economics. And what that requires is policy stability. So we need to sort of all be rowing our canoe in the same direction so that we can take these big bets. That's the first thing. The second thing is we're going to need subsidies in the beginning, because as you and I discussed, the demand isn't necessarily there yet. So we're going to provide the supply of these carbon reducing technologies with the hopes that people will actually use them and buy them. But until that happens, we're going to need some help from government. And so we're seeing both in Alberta and federally investments in CCUS, which will form the hydrogen infrastructure needed to take us out to 2050. And the final thing is we need a sort of a high level of sort of coordination. And this is maybe the hardest thing, because eventually what we're going to want to do is convert pipeline systems over to hydrogen and so on. And that requires the collaboration of industry players, regulators, communities, so that we can convert things that are now using natural gas to hydrogen and so on. And that level of coordination is going to require a lot of planning. And so I know there are a lot of people out there that would like us to be able to sort of do the genie, and make it all happen, but it's actually going to take some planning and some very careful thought.
And we're back. I'm Chris McLeod with Edmonton Global. We're here at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention inside the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub exhibit. I'm joined now by Rebecca Goldsack, who's the COO with DTI. And you're a really cool company blending AI, hydrogen, and diesel in the heavy haul trucking industry. Can you just tell us just a little bit about what you guys do?
Yeah, so we have a technology called the Guardian Hydrogen Diesel Dual Fuel Technology. And if that's a mouthful, we call it H2DF for short. And really what it is taking an existing engine that's available on the market, such as a Cummins ISX or Detroit DD series engine, and retrofitting it so that it can accept hydrogen as a secondary fuel source. So we're starting off at that 20% ratio, getting all the way up to 80% hydrogen.
Wow.
Yeah, so really what our technology is based on is really driving innovative technology for the transportation industry. And all of our technologies that we've ever developed are really rooted in reading and interpreting data and providing an action.
Okay, so I'm still just floored by that. Up to 80% hydrogen you could do? I thought it was, maybe 20%.
So to our knowledge, we are one of the only ones that are actually doing more than 20%. So you can put 20% hydrogen in relatively easy. It's just using a single port injection system. It just uses hydrogen, but you cannot go past that 20% threshold without changing different engine parameters. So turning down what would be an existing diesel injection system. And we're working on a multi-port injection system so that you're actually putting in hydrogen into each individual cylinder so that you're going to get equal ratios of hydrogen and really putting it in intelligently so that you're not wasting any hydrogen and you're putting it in at those optimal spots where you're going to burn it as efficient as you possibly can.
Okay, so this can't just be a mechanical solution then. Like, it's way more complicated.
There's so much involved in it. So it's got both the mechanical side of it, so the technology to actually retrofit the engine, and we're making sure that it's as simple as and as easy as possible for any end user or installer or any fleet to be able to use this technology. And then it's got the other side of it, which has the AI, the machine learning, the algorithms, all the technology that is based behind that, because it's really a lot different if you're driving down the highway versus, you know, stopping at a bunch of set of lights.
Right.
And so your hydrogen ratios and when you're putting that hydrogen in is really based on that. So our company uses over 50 different engine parameters that we're reading, and it's actually taking all of that engine data to provide when to do it. So we're reading things like boost, temperatures, pressures, all that different data, and it's actually going to then send that information as to when to put that hydrogen in.
So there's lots of AI that is just does it all.
Yes.
Most AI has some human component to it. Is this, you've got to be doing this real time. So does the operator have to do anything as they're driving the truck, or is it all inside the system?
It's all inside the system, and as we develop and learn new things about the technology, or, you know, want to increase those ratios, there's actually a tablet that sits inside the truck, and that's actually going to be the interface system that sends that information back and forth so that we can get that optimal efficiency, and that way we're able to, on the fly, so say, you know, we want to get an extra 10% hydrogen ratio out of that truck, we can actually push that update to the technology, through the technology to the truck to increase that efficiency.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'm trying to think about the next question, but I'm still just picturing that. That's really cool. So again, knowing it's a range with 80%
Yes.
being the most, do you have kind of a standard for how much fuel you're saving or how much carbon you're preventing from going into the atmosphere?
So one nice thing about hydrogen is that it's actually essentially steam cleaning the engine. So you're reducing, you know, your NOx and SOx and particulate matter by over 50% just doing it at the base level, but you're ultimately able to, you know, reduce all of those emission systems the more hydrogen that you're putting in, because you're making that engine so much cleaner. And by doing that, you're also making what they put in trucks right now is an EGR and DPF system. You're making them
I'll
so
pretend
that
I know what that means.
So what that is it's the system that makes the trucks more clean,
Okay.
and it's burning all that carbon buildup so that it's working, it's not in the atmosphere. So
Got it.
those are all the emission systems that they've done just in the trucking industry to get to a cleaner technology for the trucks. But this just essentially eliminates it. It's still installed, it's still there, but it requires it not to have to work as hard,
Okay.
because it's all clean before it actually gets to that
Wow.
system.
So do you have a sense then of what the emissions reduction is, kind of tailpipe side?
Yeah, so it's all, at a minimum, it's that 50%, but we can get it all the way up to 90%.
Really?
Yeah, it's because you're essentially at 80%, you're really going to just be mainly running on hydrogen and not on diesel. So, and because it's only that low ratio of diesel, it's so clean that you're not going to have any of that particulate and NOx and SOx and all
that's
that
amazing.
carbon emission systems.
You know, we talk so much about one of the hardest industries to decarbonize is heavy haul trucking. Like, I know you've used a lot of things that I didn't totally understand and some of those acronyms, but you didn't make it sound that hard. And if you can get to 90%, that's just a massive achievement.
And exactly. And for the transportation industry, I mean, diesels have been around since the beginning of
For a long
trucking
time.
inceptions. And, you know, it's a safe bet for a lot of the transportation industry. So by having a cost-effective solution for these customers that is not going to leave them stranded, you know, if they don't have that hydrogen supply available, you know, if they're in the middle of nowhere, they still can run on that diesel. So it's really allowing for that, you know, transition to the next phase of really that clean hydrogen and ultimately decarbonizing the transportation industry.
I'm really glad you raised that. You know, we've talked so much about this chicken and the egg. You know, you need enough production to drive demand, but you need enough demand to drive production. And especially in things like heavy haul, until there's a fuel, infrastructure to fuel up, it's going to be really risky to be the first mover. But if you can run your system or run just diesel, depending on availability, you're really de-risking it.
Exactly. And, making sure that we're making it cost effective. When these trucks cost $200,000, to put a $80,000 system in there is not a cost effective solution.
Yeah.
But if we can get into between that $20,000 and $30,000 retrofit kit system, and, you're reducing all of your maintenance costs because your emission systems are not going to be all full of gunk, and then you have, you're burning on clean hydrogen, which is ultimately going to reduce all your NOx and SOx and everything like that. And then it's just taking that to the next level. So it's really a nice, safe bet for the transportation industry.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Okay, again, there's so many things you've said that I'm not even sure where to take the next question. How come you guys aren't worth, why aren't you a unicorn right now? This is something that is a huge demand the world over. The amount that's spent, buying new fleets, because I think, every 5 years, a lot of the trucks get turned over. Is your door just absolutely being beat down?
Yeah, it's crazy to see the amount of interest that people have in it. But then it comes down to that chicken and egg scenario, and that's what we're trying to educate people on and make sure that they're aware that and as government agencies and stuff start pushing for this clean tech and decarbonizing everything, it's really giving that added incentives. And if you fueled up in the last few months, you've seen what gas and diesel prices have done, and
absolutely.
I think that's just giving companies just that extra drive that they need to really see what they can do to A, reduce costs, and B, make sure that they're helping the go to a green world.
Absolutely. Okay, so do you install this in existing fleets? Is it a new fleet installation? How do you actually do this?
So it's actually done on any existing fleet.
Okay.
What we're mainly focusing on is units that are no more than 5 years old, just because the average life expectancy of a truck is on average about 10 to 15 years. So there's not a large point, not to say I won't do it, but
you need ROI though.
Yes, and to get that ROI, you're really looking at that less than 5 year truck, and you can put it across whether you have a small fleet of just 1 or 2 trucks, all the way up to a huge fleet, and it's really making sure that it's that initiative that they can do.
Okay, so I'm sure that you've got a bit of a price window depending on how many units what people are doing. Can you give me a sense of what does it cost to outfit a truck?
So it totally depends on the truck and how much hydrogen you're using. So one of the big things for this is the hydrogen storage. So the amount of cylinders that are required to go onto the tank. So at, one hydrogen cylinder or a couple hydrogen cylinders, we're able to keep that cost relatively low. And then as we go up into the 80% hydrogen, there's obviously more cost. So it's between about $15,000 to $30,000, and that's kind of where we're looking
that's pretty reasonable.
Make sure that, and as we can scale it, as we can increase how many people are doing it, obviously that's going to bring our costs down and make it a relatively inexpensive retrofit for these customers.
So I asked a lot of questions at the beginning about reducing emissions, reducing carbon. Didn't really talk about reducing cost, but where do you see that at? There's not a huge supply of hydrogen right now, but as you look out into the future, do you have a sense of what the fuel savings are going to be through using this technology?
Yeah, so right now it's kind of, if I had a crystal ball to talk about it, but as the hydrogen,
we're not going to hold you to whatever the numbers are.
So what we're anticipating is even on a green hydrogen that it'll be relatively the same cost as what a diesel comparative would be. So that's kind of where we're looking to sit within. Right now it can be quite expensive for that green hydrogen, but even a blue and gray, it's that price competitive is right now, but it's once again the supply and demand and the chicken and egg. So as supply starts increasing, that demand is there, and it'll ultimately bring down the cost and make it so that it's a lot more competitive for these customers, but making sure that even from the beginning that it's really there.
Yeah, well, and it's coming fast. Suncor just made a big announcement earlier today with the MTA around producing liquid hydrogen for the trucking industry as well as bus fleets, because we have a whole bunch of trucks and buses coming on hydrogen. Air Products, they're starting construction hopefully this spring. I know they're trying to be finished their construction by 2024, and that'll be the world's largest net zero hydrogen facility that's being built right here. And a big part of that is liquid hydrogen. And there's all kinds of talk about more and more fueling stations. So I think we're right on the cusp of it. And it's going to start here in Canada, but probably quickly after we'll have Calgary, we'll have Vancouver, we'll have other places, moving us further towards Toronto. Have you looked at kind of the modeling of how that rollout looks for you?
Yeah, and a lot of where this kind of plays out is actually on the carbon tax credits. So, some provinces are offering a lot more incentive, and so it's a lot easier to, get to those areas. But then at the same time too, some provinces offer a more green electricity system, so it actually makes it more cost effective to go there. So there's definitely different pros and cons to each different province, and which ones are, with all these announcements that even Alberta's made in the last even 24 hours has been, huge for our industry, and it's only the beginning, and that's why we're so excited to be part of the change and the evolution of clean tech.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and we've had a lot of conversation over the last 2 days that this is a global challenge. We need global solutions. So we're going to do a lot of things, here in the Edmonton region in Alberta that work for what's happening here. But we need different things to work in different places, and all of us to get onto this. Yeah. So I think what you just described makes a ton of sense.
Being in Alberta, it is one of the biggest things is we have we have to be very robust. I mean, we've got roads that are in the middle of nowhere, and then we've also got this wonderful cold climate, so making sure, hydrogen is essentially water, it freezes, so making sure that it's working at these minus 50 temperatures, so that when you go to somewhere like Ontario where they have a very mild winter, we know it's going to work every time because of so designing it for the worst scenario and then taking it into an easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're almost out of time, so we're going to ask a couple of questions, and we'll do maybe kind of quick back and forth. You've been in Nashville, you've been in Toronto, you've been meeting with investors all over the place. Again, I don't know why you're not a unicorn already. Can you give us a bit of a sense on how much investment you're looking for? Are you looking for investment still? Again, we've got people tuning in from all over the place that are looking for really cool companies to be partner with. Where are you at?
Yeah, so we are definitely looking for investment. We're depending on, we have to find the right fit for us because we kind of have our roadmap already set out. So definitely looking for a strategic partner that's willing to, work with us to expedite this process. So we're looking anywhere between, $1 million to $3 million in our first round to really just push this and get it onto the market as fast as we possibly can.
Okay, that should be more than doable. Maybe stick around. There's about 5 companies I can introduce you to later on this afternoon that might gobble that right up. Okay, so thanks so much for this conversation. Again, big fans of the work you're doing. That marriage between AI, hydrogen, transportation sector. It's amazing that we've got companies who are really building that out. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so next we're going to take another little break. I think we've got 1 or 2 more conversations yet to come this afternoon. And again, I'm Chris McLeod with Edmonton Global, and we're joining you from the Canadian Hydrogen Convention right here inside the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub booth. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks so much.
Tansay Nawako Magantik, Tamskat Dinawao Gakyao, Natoki Tope Netsigas and Maskexi Oche. My name is Sacred Rider, Chief Billy Morin from the Enoch Cree Nation, and I am the Vice Chair of the Hydrogen Hub in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Well, hi, Chief Morin. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and to speak to the TFE community. I want to start with speaking about or exploring how you would characterize the potential that hydrogen represents for Canada's future economy.
Yeah, great question, Tim. Thanks for the question, and thanks for the opportunity today. Well, the potential is quite simply this. 2050 net zero for Canada is a real thing, and I think we have to get there tangibly and practically. And hydrogen will be a pillar of a net zero carbon economy in Canada. I think it goes without saying that this is Alberta in particular, probably the strongest opportunity economically to start to transition to a more net zero economy. Again, noting that we can transition with the expertise, the experience, the know-how, and quite frankly, the identity of Edmonton and Alberta in oil and gas into something such as hydrogen.
So you are the vice chair of the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, which was recently created. I want to ask two questions about that. First of all, what is a hydrogen hub? How would you define that? And who are the parties involved in Edmonton's regional hydrogen hub?
So the hub is quite simply in Edmonton at this point, a combination of local municipal leaders, government leaders, local private industry, local arms-like organizations such as the Accelerator, local business groups such as the Sturgeon County Heartland Association, so private sector, government, and it takes regionally all these players to really, again, create that zone, create that environment to excel hydrogen into actual development instead of just talking about it. And the final ingredient there, I would say, is the First Nations themselves. So, here in Edmonton, Alberta, and Canada, we're seeing reconciliation economically and reconciliation of including First Nations. So we're proud to be at the table in the Hydrogen Hub, and I'm extremely fortunate to be the vice chair.
Why was Edmonton and the region chosen for Canada's first hydrogen hub? And what do you see as the region's unique advantages for this, especially in terms of investors who are looking to benefit from the potential that hydrogen represents for the future economy?
I guess Edmonton's advantage is this. Again, this is oil and gas country. We have an abundant amount of gas and gas infrastructure here, and we're gonna have blue hydrogen. We have all the variables, the capital, the infrastructure, again, the gas supply. We have the expertise in refining and extraction of gas. And that's what's really driving this process. It's economically viable here with the same principles and the foundation that we have. So that's what makes Edmonton different, and going to be the catalyst in Canada for investors, for foreign investors, on how they're going to come into the region and what makes them feel safe is, again, the hub itself is not just the city by itself. It's not just one minister by themselves. It's not just one kind of pie in the sky company. It's local regional players at all levels who want to facilitate this growth. And I'm not sure you have that coordination in other regions across Canada. This is the most coordinated one. This is the one that makes the most economic sense. And so this is the one that's already translated into something like Air Products investing in $1 billion into the local region. So again, all the factors and the leaders are moving in the same direction for foreign investment.
You mentioned that First Nations have to have a seat at the table, and they do, and you being the vice chair. How do you think First Nations and Indigenous stakeholders have to be engaged in development of hydrogen, not only in Edmonton, but across Canada? And how well is Edmonton doing this? Can you mention any instances of lesson learned or best practices?
Yeah, for First Nations engagement, I look to we look to history, and here in Canada, again, resource extraction for First Nations has always been paternalistic. The Indian Act, which legislates First Nations business and First Nations interaction, even just within the economy, has held First Nations back for the better part of a century now, especially when it comes to oil and gas. So, there's so many lessons to be learned, because that legacy, we're seeing great wins. But we're also seeing wins too much defined in court and too much defined in adversarial, too much defined in conflict. But there's lessons to be learned again, because again, early on in the oil and gas development process, 50, 60 years ago, when my great grandfather was chief, it was the Minister of Indigenous Relations controlling that, right from the transaction, right to the sharing of wealth and building the nation from those resources. And now, early on in the development of a new kind of industry, building off of industries that have already been here, First Nations are right there, right at the start, maybe in the regulatory conversation, right at the start in the production conversation, right at the start in the equity conversation. So again, to us, hydrogen represents that transition and that opportunity for lessons learned that First Nations were wronged in the past when it comes to oil and gas development. So kind of a clean slate. And First Nations are ready to participate at this time. It's not just about the bottom line. It's you got to come into the nations and get to know the people. You got to come in and get to know, as juvenile as this sounds, Billy's grandma. You got to participate in a ceremony. You got to share a meal with us. And again, that might sound a little juvenile, but what you can think of First Nations as is large family businesses. So a community such as mine is a 2,632 person family business. And the way family businesses do business is you got to come and meet us. We're very welcoming, by the way. So we love to share our story. We love to share our culture, and we're very welcoming.
Oh, I love the idea of that. And I hope you can hook up our next interview with Billy's grandma, because we'd love to expose her to the world as well.
It's kind of true because, again, large family business is, Billy's grandma was on leadership before. Billy's grandma oversees business as a leader 20 years ago. So again, she's the elder in the room who I have to run things by. So she's not just my grandma, she's also a senior advisor to the nation.
I want to know, in terms of economic growth, in terms of all the other opportunities that it might represent, how do you define or characterize the potential for hydrogen for Indigenous populations, Indigenous First Nations, not only necessarily for Enoch in Edmonton or in Alberta, but across the board, across Canada?
Well, for us, what potential does hydrogen production represent for Indigenous nations? It represents to us across Canada, not just Enoch, the opportunity to live up to our reputation. So, Indigenous people are seen as the stewards of the land. We're here to ultimately protect the land. That's the teachings historically our elders passed down to us as our responsibility, to do right by Mother Earth, to also find a balance in making money, creating business, but doing it in a sustainable way that honors Mother Earth and our traditional teachings. That's what hydrogen to me represents in this local regional economy in the hub.
You mentioned throughout the interview all these different groups that are involved in the hub, that have to be involved in the hub to ensure its success. Government, business, both local and foreign, and obviously First Nations such as yourself. How cooperative are all these partners in the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub? And from a foreign investor's perspective, how welcoming do you see that business ecosystem as being?
Well, right now, I would say the local partners are very much on the same page. So, again, we're fortunate enough as First Nations to sit at that table with multiple other mayors and local regional representatives. And, when boots hit the ground on something like Air Products investment into a production facility on the east side of Edmonton, they can count on the local mayor. They can count on the local First Nations. They can count on the local industry throughout the production value chain and the systematic chain to be there for support. I think, again, if you're a foreign investor, come and see us, come and talk to us. And, I think the First Nations themselves, as opposed to maybe the municipalities or even the private sector, have a different arm's length access to the government, a different lobbying, a different mechanism to go into government and say, because again, we categorize ourselves as nations. So ultimately, we're here to share, but First Nations themselves can create legislation. They can create regulatory regimes. We would never do it at the cost of quality, but I think we represent an arm that has never been thought of by private sector, industry, and quite frankly, foreign investment to get over these little humps and these little regulations and these little things that government sometimes do to get in the way of new innovations in new sectors. So as a foreign investor, some of the first people I want to talk to, actually, if I was them, would be the First Nations to create that environment for kind of fast, the speed of business, innovation, getting it from just an idea over getting it just from research to commercialization. I think First Nations represent kind of a new arm to get it there sooner.
Hi, I'm Chris. Ooh, that's loud. Hi, I'm Chris McLeod with Edmonton Global. We're here at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention inside the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub. And I am thrilled to be joined by Mayor Elena Naciu. She is the mayor of Sturgeon County, and really for today, she's also the chair of the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, and has been just an absolute leader in making not just this hydrogen convention happen, but just all the things that have been happening across our region in hydrogen. So, Mayor Naciu, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Chris.
Yeah.
And thank you to Edmonton Global for creating this magical spot here. There's been a lot of great networking and conversations. It's very welcoming and has set the tone for what the entire convention is, which is welcome to the region, welcome to hydrogen.
Yeah, thanks so much. You know, there's a whole bunch of people that got together to do this. And one of the things that I'm really happy about is this is a collaboration. So there's so many organizations from the federal government to the province, you know, all these municipalities, First Nations, people like Emissions Reduction Alberta. It's really rare, I think, that many organizations get together to do something for the greater good.
And I think that's what makes hydrogen a bit of the unicorn. It's just this level of alignment between communities, economic development organizations, all levels of government, industry, thought leaders, entrepreneurs. I mean, and that's the beauty of the mix that's here, because planning the future of the energy evolution, supporting what organically takes place, but also facilitating a transition of a complex system of not just fuel, but of electricity, of local demand and accessing export markets. That takes a lot of diversity of thought and diversity of approach and open and honest conversations. And I think there's just been a level of collaboration from the very inception that has started to create the relationships which, you know, just set the expectation and the standards for the kind of communication and collaboration that is necessary. And in my opening remarks the other day, I mentioned, and this has been a part of the conversation for, you know, over 2 years, about the type of courageous and radically collaborative leadership that we need. And I'm really pleased to see that showing up across sectors. And that's why we're here today. That's why we could pull this together in a matter of mere months.
Yeah, and so just hold the mic just a hair closer. Perfect. And, you know, I love that you're using that word radical. You know, and one of the things we've really been trying to do as Edmonton Global is drive a radical transformation of our economy. And the work that you're leading around hydrogen, you know, is an absolute living proof that it's possible. You know, a year ago, we weren't really talking that much about hydrogen. Today, we've got, you know, somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 people here from around the world who've bought into it, you know, understand what's possible, and are trying to find ways to collaborate, to invest, and to learn from what's already happening. So how does it feel to be, you know, someone who's again, chairing the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub and seeing this stuff kind of come together?
Well, as somebody who's responsible for public dollars and for the future of a community, I'm always seeking to validate and prove value. And so, again, in my remarks, talking about the intersection of value and values, which the energy of evolution really has to consider. What's our value set, but where's the value in the employment and the economics and the environment? All of those things come together. So I'm really pleased to see how many people showed up and to see all of the work come to fruition in such a really energetic way. And so for the conversations that I've had, people have seen value in this. So those of us who've been rolling the rock uphill for 2 years are seeing value in the work. Those that have been, you know, thinking about this in their labs and their basements or their boardrooms are seeing value in the connections of all of the different varieties of people that are here from around the world. So to me, that's the cherry on top, and something obviously that will support the next 9 years when this comes back year after year after year. So I'm pleased to see that we've held true to our values, to know that we need to do ESG, not just in documents, but in action. And I'm getting that sense from the conversations I've had for the people that, you know, have come here. So for me, that's hugely gratifying. But this is also just the start.
Yeah. Well, the goal of this conference is to grow it into the world's largest hydrogen conference. we want within 5 years for this to be a 40 to 50,000 person event. And I need to change my language because I keep saying we want, and instead I need to say it is going to be. Because I think the whole region is so focused on this. And we had a conversation with Invest in Canada earlier. We've talked a lot to Invest Alberta and others. And it really feels like there's again, more than our community. There's a whole nation behind trying to make this happen. And this can be kind of the focal point for what's going on really in North America. I'm curious about some of the conversations you've had. So, you've been here, you've been on the main stage.
7 o'clock Tuesday morning.
Yeah, early every day, late every night. Do you have some big takeaways from some of the conversations you've had with people, whether that's, locals or internationals that are here?
Well, I think the takeaway is what's worked here, collaboration, which was really the inception of the hub when the Transition Accelerator was doing their work on, hydrogen being a disruptor that could be a game changer. They were looking for people that were willing to listen to that story. And the Heartland Association, having over 20 years of collaboration, proving success, and having, being a game changer in the region, but across Alberta and across Canada, that kind of collaboration is what gave the board the trust to take the next steps. And we add in more partners and take more steps and add in more partners. So the collaboration that was the inception of this will also need to be consistent throughout. And that's the takeaway, the level of discussion and collaboration that brought this together. Again, we need to continue to collaborate going forward so that we can all head back to our boardrooms, our communities, our countries, and level up, sharing enough information, because ultimately the winner is the world. The whole point of this is to decarbonize, to lower our emissions, and to drive jobs and a bright future for the earth and for all of our children on it. And so I think this will play an important role in paving the pathway to that future.
Yeah, so much of the theme of this, of what the conversations we've had, and especially the interviews we've been doing on our stage here, have been about, this is a global challenge. It's also a global opportunity, and the whole world needs to transition. It's not just that it's about one region or one place winning over another. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we solve this global challenge, and it's really I don't even know what the right word is for it. It's kind of humbling to think that we're at the middle of this and that we're kind of demonstrating what's possible to the rest of the world and maybe helping solve some of those problems, whether that's by exporting technologies or process or collaborative models or export of hydrogen. So I just kind of wonder about, it's too early yet to talk about legacies coming out of some of this work, but as being the person who really helped not just the industrial heartland, over the years get into this, but really helped form the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub. Have you started to think about that, like legacy, now that you're, here?
I've already, don't want to say I've left the building, but I'm already like a week from now saying, okay, you've got a stack of business cards, you've made some relationships. Now we need to action that. And that's the exciting part about the conversations I've had here. There's movers and shakers here.
Oh, yeah.
There's people who, much like myself, understand the importance of pilot projects and demonstration projects, but this is a time of implementation. There is technology that exists already to be able to start the transition, and perfection is the enemy of good. So I'm pleased to see Nicola. I'm pleased to see just all of the opportunities here to actually start to implement lower carbon footprints in our life day to day. And it's also been interesting because I think regionally we push each other.
Yeah.
As you know, we are always expecting more, better, driving things forward. So I think we've become quite critical of ourselves. And so it's been interesting to see the perspective of the outside world showing up and telling us what they think of us and the opportunities that they see. And so it's been a bit of a reset of perspective as well, to be really grateful for what we have, but it also has just reinvigorated the sense of responsibility to be a good steward of the natural resources that we have, because ultimately our best natural resources are people.
Totally.
And that's what's going to drive it, and that's really the impetus for all of this work. So that's been a positive thing. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, I don't care if you did or not. It was a really good answer. And you're a global thinker. You've traveled. You've had conversations with the companies, from all different walks. Again, led the Heartland Association. I know recently you were in the UAE meeting with companies and governments. There's a lot of similarity between what's happening there and what's happening here. They've got a lot of big militaries, big economies surrounding them. We've got the U.S. Kind of surrounding us. Again, around that spirit of and thinking around collaboration and global mindset, I wonder too. And again, we've got a large delegation of them here. Are there similarities in the challenge that you see between, countries like the UAE and Canada or other countries around the world that we actually just had a conversation with Innovate Norway, and just seems so similar, the things that they're trying to do and the challenges they're facing? I just wonder if you've got perspective on that.
Well, my takeaway from my trip there is that we have more in common than we do different, which is always the important part of traveling, is because we can become quite isolated and start to feel like we're different or better than, or that we don't have things in common, especially if people don't look like us. And so, or we think they don't, necessarily their societies aren't structured the same, but we all want the same thing in the end. And we all see the value in, agriculture. Like, that's what I took away. There's so many synergies around aviation, aerospace, agriculture, energy, and that transition from natural gas to renewables, but also the understanding and the responsibility of dealing with peak weather and making sure that people stay warm when they need to stay warm and cool when they need to stay cool. I mean, obviously I was certainly envious of the fact they don't have frost cycles to deal with. They can build things in different timelines and investment cycles than we do here. But just the alignment and the interest around agriculture and energy was really interesting, and just their desire to want to build a better, healthier, happier society. And in the end, that is the motivation for anyone in public service anyway that I work with.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So let's talk a little bit about the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, and maybe just about the region's value prop as well. When you are talking to companies, when you're talking to investors, or even other government leaders, kind of what's the pitch you give about what's happening here and why people should be paying attention?
Well, again, just back to the people. I think everybody here is really motivated to look at the investment that's here already and figure out how we can, build a pathway to a brighter future using what's already invested, because taxpayers don't necessarily care to see the house of cards knocked down or shifts happen and sunk costs lost. So anytime that we can leverage investment, and whether that's the skill set of the labor force that's here or the infrastructure in the ground, that's the important piece. But again, I think maybe it's the northern climate we live in. We are highly collaborative. And again, I think that's why we can move as quickly as we do and as far as we do, as fast as we do. So obviously that's the leverage, whether it's working at the Edmonton Metro Regional Board or at Edmonton Global or at the Heartland Association or at the Hub. I see the importance of relationships and trying to figure out what everybody needs out of it, and then trying to build a framework that supports the needs and the deliverables of everybody at the table. And we do that here. And it's not easy. No. It's like, it's like any family. Sometimes the dinners are messy. But in the end, we all have the same outcomes desired, and that's to have a relevant, healthy economy and a sound environment and be good stewards of the natural resources that are here, and to be able to grow. If this population is going to, go to double in the next 25 years, that takes some really thoughtful and intentional planning. And the people at the table right now are the right people at the table. We've got some really impressive thought leaders in the communities and First Nations as well. And so now is really carpe diem, seize the day. And that's the value proposition, is not just what we have underground in geology and geography, but the people that are sitting at the table right now.
Yeah, and the commitment to get it done. So, on that note about having the right leaders and the right people at the table, I think that's maybe a good place to end, because I worked here for, 3.5 years, really since the beginning of Edmonton Global. I've lived in the region, most of my life. I'd say we have the right leaders in place. We've got the right people leading the work of the hub. We've got just amazing energy, with you really at the helm of it. But it is the universities, the colleges, the polytechnics, the political leaders, the business leaders, the financial leaders, you name it. People are getting behind this, are believing in what we're trying to do. And that mix, I think, is where the magic happens. So, if people aren't paying attention to what's going on in the Edmonton region, before, they need to be now. To their peril, because this is where it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So again, I wanted to just say thank you so much for being here, for having this quick little conversation, for all the work you've done to help make this possible, and for the amazing things that are going to come. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's been an incredible couple of days, and I'm looking forward to next year already.
Yeah, me too. So we're going to at least double the size next year, probably quadruple it. Again, we wanted this to be the largest hydrogen convention in the world. We think we're going to hit about 50,000 people within 5 years. This is the last live stream conversation we're having, for these 2 days. That's not actually the end of the conference, though. We've got tours happening across Alberta's industrial heartland tomorrow. That is more than fully subscribed. So we've got a packed house with that. We've got an investor summit we're running tomorrow. We've got tours happening around other parts of the region over the next couple of days. And next year is going to be even better. So if you haven't booked your tickets yet, book them. We'll see you here next year. And on behalf of Edmonton Global, the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, and all of our partners, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next year.
Walking up into it, mountain where we fall asleep, holding on to a little bit of love, waking in sunshine, cool air, feeling fine, high, lost my mind, holding on to a little bit of love. Smile's getting bigger, I'm still trying to figure out if I should keep holding on to a little bit of love. Fall, leaves falling down, back to another rough year on the ground. I'm airplane bound, holding on to a little bit of love. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-da-boom.